That day, Amanda's life went downhill fast. Her husband Bill had had too much to drink, and as usual was fooling around. Drunkenness is a bad thing, but this time his pranks went too far. He decided to teach his wife how to shoot a hunting rifle. Amanda didn't like the idea right away. She didn't even want to hold the gun, and begged him not to. "Bill, please. I've never shot a gun before. I'm bound to do something wrong. I'll break something or hit a neighbor's window. God forbid. You'd better sign me up for the shooting range later," she begged her husband. "What shooting range is there? What do you need a husband for? You do not be afraid. Everything will be now. It's elementary," continued to insist husband. It was impossible to argue with drunk Bill. He constantly psychologically pressured the man and forced others to participate in his entertainment even against their will. And so it was now. Her husband was twisting the gun in Amanda's hands in different directions, showing her how to hold and aim it correctly. And periodically he gave loud commands so that she could aim and pull the trigger correctly. Because of her husband's constant demanding instructions during the training, Amanda became confused and accidentally pulled the trigger just as the barrel was resting against his chest. They had just recently gotten married. Amanda didn't even realize what had happened at first. She stood there with the shotgun in her hand, watching the purple stain on Bill's white t-shirt. The shotgun was loaded with field ammunition designed for big game hunting. My husband thought that if he was going to hunt, he should hunt wild boar or elk. At home, he entertained himself by shooting at moving targets. But today, unexpectedly, the target was himself. Amanda was brought out of her stupor by her mother-in-law's scream. She and her husband were visiting her son. And now, apparently Grace had gone out into the yard to check on the young ones. Then everything, mind you, spun like a kaleidoscope. The ambulance and the police arrived. Amanda then vaguely remembered what had happened. It was all a blur. Deafeningly, as if through absorbent cotton, she could hear her mother-in-law's screams and wails and the questions the police asked her. "Citizen Amanda, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder and will now be taken to a detention cell for a decision on your detention. Is that clear to you?" Amanda remained silent, staring at one point. The policeman handcuffed her and led her to a squad car parked near the scene. The only thing her parents' lawyer was able to do was to change the detention to a non-detention order due to the suspect's pregnancy. Thanks to this, Amanda was able to get to her husband's funeral to say goodbye to him. But a new nightmare awaited her there. Amanda did not want to show her face to her parents-in-law, who now wished her death every time they saw her. So she watched the funeral procession from her hiding place. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her back. Someone had hit her hard from behind. Turning around, Amanda saw a girl she didn't know with a face that was innocent and twisted with anger. She was holding a stick of some kind, which she appeared to be intending to strike again. "Are you out of your mind? Why did you hit me?" Amanda shrieked, but quietly, so as not to attract the attention of the people present at the funeral. Another scandal she would not survive. "I'll kill you, you bastard," screamed the girl, and like an enraged tigress, pounced on Amanda. She barely managed to dodge another blow and grabbed the stick at the last moment. "Stop this at once," Amanda shouted, trying to take the instrument of crime away from the angry girl. "What did I do to you?" "You bitch, you killed the man I love. I'll never forgive you for that," the stranger wailed tearfully. "What lover? Are you mistaking me for someone else, or did you get the funeral wrong? They are burying my husband now." Amanda tried to understand the situation. "His parents forced him to marry you. He always loved only me. And even when you got married, he still came to me. And then you killed him and took him away from me forever," the stranger wept tearfully. "If Bill has gone to the other world, you will go with him. I will avenge him." Only now Amanda realized who was trying to kill her and why. She was facing the mistress of her husband, whose accidental death she feared so much. And now Amanda didn't know if he was really her husband or if her whole family life was a farce. Amanda lowered her hands and said quietly, "I didn't kill Bill, it was an accident. He was drunk, making me learn to shoot a gun. I didn't want to. He forced me. Then Bill was twirling the gun around, giving me commands on what to do. He gave me a command, and I got scared and pulled the trigger. That's how it happened." After these words, the stranger dropped her hands. The stick fell to the ground from her hands. The girl looked pitifully at Amanda and wandered away in an unknown direction. Amanda didn't wait for the funeral to end either, and before anyone noticed her, walked back home. She was now living with her parents, as her mother-in-law had kicked her out of the house she had bought during the marriage. She didn't want to return to the house where she had caused the death of a man, even if without direct intent. Anyway, at home, Amanda was afraid even of her own shadow. She waited for the verdict of the court. The trial did not last long. because for both the investigation and the court, everything was obvious. Brown's family was very rich. Grief-stricken Bill's family did everything to make sure that his daughter-in-law got a real term, and even her pregnancy did not stop them. As a result, Amanda ended up in a correctional institution at which a children's home was organized, where pregnant and nursing convicts were kept. But apparently this child was not destined to see the light of day. Amanda had a miscarriage, and soon after a short stay in the infirmary, she was transferred to a regular barracks. There Amanda served the monotonous gray days of her imprisonment. 3 years later, a very different Amanda was released. Not that naive girl, but a woman who was wise to her troubles, cynical and self-aware. Fortunately, she was not alone in this life. She had parents who not only did not turn away from their daughter, despite the public censure, but also supported her in every possible way. They were also well-to-do people, so they were able to agree with the head of the colony that Amanda would be looked after during her court-ordered term of imprisonment. The lawyer presented the head of the colony with a thank you note from her parents, and he promised the convict his personal patronage. As Amanda walked out of the gates of the penitentiary, she turned around to take one last look at the place where she had spent the last 3 years. "Goodbye," she said to the female officers on duty at the entrance. "That don't you dare speak," one of them said. "Goodbye." Amanda crossed the threshold of the checkpoint and squinted her eyes against the blindingly bright light. There was hardly any direct sunlight in the barracks, and the walks were no more than an hour a day. As a result, her eyes had gotten used to the daylight willy-nilly. As Amanda got a little more accustomed to the bright sun, she took in the sight of 2 human figures standing alone on the curb across the street from her. They were her parents. God knows how long they had been standing here waiting for her to come out. Even Amanda herself didn't know the exact time when the procedure would end. "Amanda. Daughter, how did you lose so much weight behind bars?" Deborah was like hugging a dried-up chicken. "What did those monsters do to you? I can't even look at you without crying. What did we pay the warden for? He's probably embezzling food at our expense. Daughter, you need to get better, and we'll take you abroad to the best specialists right away," Dustin added. Even he had tears in his eyes at the sight of the haggard face of his little princess, as he always called her. "But what foreign country could there be now?" Amanda answered her parents sadly, looking at them furtively, like a hunted animal. "I need to get used to normal life first." Amanda wanted to wander the streets of her hometown at least a little, to breathe the air of freedom, to get used to society and the eternal bustle of the city. After the measured, monotonous existence in the prison walls, she definitely needed rehabilitation and social adaptation. Her parents offered to accompany her, but Amanda refused. "If you patronize me everywhere like a child, I will never return to a normal, independent life," she said reproachfully. "Let the mother go." Dustin supported her and put his hand on Deborah's shoulder. Deborah looked at her husband with incredible sadness in her eyes, but remained silent. And so Amanda took timid steps into her once hometown, cautiously, as if an astronaut who had just stepped onto an unknown planet. A lot had changed in 3 years, and she no longer recognized the streets where she had walked yesterday. Life behind the barbed wire had not stood still. It had stopped flowing only for her and the other prisoners, having fallen out of the mainstream for only 3 years. Amanda realized she was already struggling to fit in. There were strangers rushing around, not caring about the problems of their neighbors. And Amanda was like a wild animal that had been locked up for a long time, and now decided to go free. After wandering around, Amanda decided to go to the mall to update her closet. She had really lost a lot of weight before going to juvie, and her old clothes were now hanging on her like a hanger. As she entered the store, Amanda caught a glimpse of a woman wearing large sunglasses who pretended to look in the window. When Amanda turned her head in her direction, she thought it was not the first time she had seen her today. In the store, Amanda walked between the rows of clothes, looking for something suitable for her trip abroad. Amanda didn't know what was in fashion, since it was very difficult to keep track of fashion trends from prison. All the prisoners there wore robes that they sewed themselves. The girl consultant looked at the customer who was timidly looking at the latest collection of clothes. Now in Amanda, it was difficult to suspect a potential client of an expensive boutique, but the saleswoman's eye determined that she was a visitor, even if not ultra-fashionable, but very inexpensive clothes. Especially natural fur coat, which, although it was a little big, but clearly not from someone else's shoulder. Tastefully chosen branded shoes and a handbag from the collection of the past 5 years finally convinced her of the client's solvency, and she, putting on a smile, approached Amanda. "Mitzi, can I help you, young lady?" the saleswoman asked. "Yes, I guess so," Amanda said happily. Previously, the helpfulness and intrusiveness of salespeople had only annoyed her. I can tell you which outfits are the most popular right now. Or are you looking for something specific? The sales assistant asked. I'm going on a trip abroad and I don't want to look ridiculous, Amanda replied. Can you find me a closet for everyday outings? I will buy the rest on the spot. So what country are you going to? If it's not a secret. I don't think I'm nosy. It's just that in Europe one thing is in fashion now, and in Asian countries, for example, they wear something a little different, said the saleswoman. I'm going to Israel. Amanda was happy. But then everything is much simpler. The women there don't care much about fashion. They are very fond of things made of natural fabrics. Many of them prefer country-style clothes. The main thing is that everything in the closet was as comfortable as possible. The consultant picked out the most suitable things, in her opinion, and handed them to Amanda to try on. Amanda was about to go to the fitting room, and then, casually glancing at the transparent street window, she saw the strange woman in dark glasses again. She was clearly watching her. This was beginning to make Amanda tense. She went into the fitting room, but her thoughts kept returning to the stranger who was clearly stalking her. Amanda's mood faded and her desire to choose clothes vanished. Apologizing to the consultant, she hurried out of the boutique. On the way out, Amanda noticed a familiar female silhouette darting over the ledge. She pretended not to notice the woman following her and walked past her as if nothing had happened. But when she reached the first corner, she turned sharply around the corner. There, hiding behind the ledge of the shopping center, Amanda waited for her pursuer. She didn't wait long. In a couple of minutes, the same stranger in big glasses appeared and looked around confused. Amanda jumped out of her hiding place and grabbed the stranger's arm before she could realize anything. Why have you been following me around all day? What do you want from me? Amanda asked. When she finally got a closer look at the woman, she realized who was standing in front of her. It was her husband Bill's mistress who had attacked her at his funeral. Damn murderer, Amanda exclaimed. My Bill's been rotting in the ground for 3 years, and you're already walking around free and going to boutiques. Where's the justice in that? Young lady, I already explained everything to you on the day of Bill's funeral. The woman replied. I thought you understood. I had to take revenge. It's my moral obligation to Bill. I watched you all day, waiting for the right moment, but I didn't have the guts. She cried. Bill and I loved each other so much, but his parents thought me. A girl from a dysfunctional family was no match for their son and forced me to marry you. Bill told me you were the daughter of a friend of his father's in the business. And by the way, I had a son after Bill died. You have a son by Bill? Amanda asked in a low voice, remembering her unborn child. I do, the stranger replied bitterly. And it's very hard to support him alone. Amanda, who herself had lost a child and didn't really love her ex-husband that much, as she had already realized in the zone, felt sorry for the woman. Suddenly, Amanda felt sorry for her former rival. I don't think we have anything to share with you anymore, she summarized. What's your name? We've been through so much together, and we still haven't met. My name is Kayla, the woman answered. And you must be Amanda, but you probably know that already, since Bill, unlike me, must have shared information with you. Yeah, he told me about you, Amanda nodded. Kayla, look, I'm leaving here soon anyway, and you've got a baby on the way. It's kind of indirectly my fault that he's growing up without a father. Can you please take this money? It's all I have on me right now. I'll give you more after the trip and take my fur coat too. Yours probably won't keep the boy warm at all. It won't stand the harsh frosts. With these words, Amanda pulled off her expensive coat, which reminded her too much of the past. Oh, come on. Why? I can't accept it. It's a very expensive thing, Kayla, trying to keep her pride intact, retorted. Bill gave it to me once, so I guess you have more right to it than I do, Amanda said. Kayla looked at the coat with different eyes now, as if a piece of Bill was still on it. She timidly took the gift with trembling hands. What about you without outerwear? It's winter, she worried. I've already called a cab. It'll be here soon, so don't worry about me. You better give me your phone number. When I get back from my trip, I will definitely visit you and the baby. The women exchanged phone numbers and parted almost as friends. Here's my cab, Amanda said, and waved goodbye to Kayla. A couple of days later, her parents took Amanda to Los Angeles to rest and improve her health. They had friends there, so she could stay with them and visit old friends. Amanda, the California climate will be good for you, her mother urged her. There's the Pacific Ocean. You can choose what you want. And if you get tired of the sea, you can often sunbathe on the beach by the lake. And the doctors here are among the best, continued to convince her mother. They'll put you back on your feet in no time. Of course, February is not the best month for swimming, but the resorts of the Pacific Ocean are available all year round. And if you stay here longer, we can enjoy our vacation in Los Angeles to the fullest. We're already here. Do you really think I'm running away from here? Amanda was surprised at her mother's stubbornness. You might not run away, but you could spend the whole day in your room, refusing to go to the beach, she argued. And you need to breathe fresh sea air, to be in the sun more, to get rid of this pale complexion at last. My face is fine, Amanda tried to object. Have you looked at yourself in the mirror? Her mother persisted. Daughter, start. Look, I read in a magazine that you should drink carrot juice to get an even and beautiful tan. I have already agreed in the kitchen at the local restaurant you and I will cook carrot juice every morning. Dad doesn't want to get a tan, so he'll do without the carrot juice. But you and I will have some. Isn't that a good drink, sweetie? Just don't lecture me anymore, Amanda gave in. She followed all the doctor's recommendations, and after a month she was really transformed. Now in this breathing, healthy, beautiful, well-groomed girl was unrecognizable, yesterday's prisoner. But all good things usually come to an end quickly. And so this fabulous vacation came to an end. Dad's business required his presence, and the whole family had to move back to LA. Oh my God, we're finally home, Amanda exhaled. It's nice to be home. But you have to admit, it's better at home, daughter, her mother smiled. If it hadn't been for Dad's business, we would have stayed there for a couple more months. But alas, your father is a very busy man, and we can't stay in a foreign country without him for long, and we can't leave my father alone. You know he has a heart condition. You never know. Mom, don't make excuses, Amanda stopped her. I'm tired of this vacation and endless doctor's recommendations. Her father left right away, and while her mother did the chores, Amanda decided to look at the news feed. Nothing much had happened in the past month. The town had had a few power outages, and twice the water had been turned off. There had been a major sewer break once, just normal city life. Amanda was about to close the laptop, but then out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a strange photograph. It showed the body of a woman whose face was not visible, but what caught Amanda's attention was the painfully familiar fur coat. Oh my God, that's the same Kayla who gave me her coat, Amanda gasped as she ran her eyes over the news article and covered her face with her hands. The news report stated that a week ago, unknown assailants had robbed Kayla Brown, hitting her in the head with something heavy. The woman died at the scene from a head injury she sustained. Police have appealed for anyone who knows anything about the case to come forward. She has a baby, Amanda mumbled. She didn't sleep well last night. All night long she had nightmares. Strange images appeared before her, tormenting her mind. She periodically woke up in a cold sweat and was relieved to realize that it was only a terrible dream. In the morning, barely able to clean herself up after a sleepless night, Amanda decided to go to the police to find out the details of Kayla's death and to inquire about the fate of her baby. In the stuffy office, a middle-aged man in civilian clothes sat behind a desk. It was an investigator. This was where the Kayla Brown murder case was being investigated. Amanda had been told about it by the police. What do you got? The investigator asked gruffly. Do you have something important to report? Hello, the thing is, I knew the deceased. Not close, of course, but I had a couple of conversations with her, and I gave her the fur coat she was found in, Amanda said. When I saw that picture on the news of Kayla lying face down in my coat, I had the strangest feeling, like I was seeing my own body from behind, lying on the ground. It's very similar, the investigator said, moving closer. You say you gave Kayla Brown the coat she was later found dead in. Yes, Amanda nodded, a couple days before I left for Israel for treatment. I was out of town for a month. I just got back from my flight yesterday, and when I was looking at the news, I came across this. Well, the investigator stretched out. How can you confirm this? Does anyone know that you gave Kayla a fur coat? No, Amanda shook her head. Not unless my mom did. I went shopping that day and came back to my parents' house in a cab without the coat. I handed it to Kayla at the mall, took it off and handed it to her. I got into a cab not far from home. My mom wondered where my coat had gone. I had to tell her about the gift. And what was the need to give a coat to a complete stranger in the middle of the street? Frowned the investigator. For you to understand what I did, I'll probably have to tell you the whole story of how I met Kayla from the beginning, Amanda sighed. You're the only person who can shed any light on this murder so far, the investigator said. To be honest, there are some things I don't agree with from the beginning. As we found out, the deceased Kayla Brown was not a woman of means. In fact, she was barely making ends meet. All of a sudden, this expensive fur coat. She was attacked, presumably for robbery. But they didn't take the expensive coat, and she had nothing in her purse anyway. So come on, tell me how, where, and under what circumstances did you meet Kayla? Every detail can be helpful. I met her 3 years ago at my husband Bill's funeral, Amanda began. Amanda flinched. Someone hit me in the back with a stick. I turned around and saw Kayla. I didn't know her name at the time. She tried to hit me again, but I dodged. Then I found out she was my dead husband's mistress, or rather, she was his fiancée, whom he really loved, unlike me. His parents married him to me, but I didn't find that out until after my husband died from Kayla. And why did Kayla attack you with sticks? The coroner asked. She blamed me for Bill's death and wanted revenge, Amanda replied. Did I have anything to do with his death? Amanda lowered her gaze. I served 3 years for manslaughter. My husband was drunk. That night he made me learn how to shoot a gun. He twirled the barrel while the gun was in my hands and yelled at me to get a better grip on the gun, to learn how to pull some on. I was very nervous, and with a fright I accidentally pulled the trigger, and the barrel was pointed at him at the time. Bill died instantly. And after that everyone cursed me, his parents, his friends, and the mistress I found out about at the funeral. So your husband's parents also wished you dead, surprised the investigator. Yes, in court they shouted that 3 years for the murder of their son was too little, and they wanted me to die in prison. And if I tried to get out, they promised to do justice on their own and send me after Bill. So they threatened you. I can understand them, Amanda sighed, her eyes downcast. After all, my only son is dead, and as hard as it is for me to admit it, I had something to do with his death. But why did you decide to give the coat to Kayla after she tried to kill you? It's kind of a weird thing to do. Kayla was following me that day, but I spotted her following me, so I stalked her outside the mall. She admitted that she wanted to get back at me for Bill's death, but she didn't go through with it. Then Kayla cried and told me how much she and Bill loved each other, and that she had a son after he died and had to raise him alone. I felt sorry for her and the baby, and I wanted to do something for them. I gave away all the money I had on me, and that fur coat. Bill had given it to me anyway. It was hard for me to look at it because of the memories. So you're saying that when you saw the photo of the murdered woman dressed in your coat, you felt uncomfortable because from behind Kayla looked like you in the case? The investigator asked. Yes, that's right, Amanda nodded. And if someone were shown a picture of me in that coat, would they mistake me for Kayla? I don't know. I guess if it looked like you from behind, I guess they could have, the investigator replied. Why are you asking me that? Do you think your attacker mistook you for Kayla? I didn't say that. You said it yourself, he objected. Now think about it. Was there anyone besides Kayla who was murdered who wanted you dead? Amanda lowered her gaze. Bill's parents had uttered threats and curses, but that's not serious, is it? It doesn't really count. The investigator stared at her in silence. Why don't you say anything? Amanda asked without waiting for an answer. Let's not jump to conclusions. I will check the information you have provided and contact you if necessary. And if you remember anything or find out anything, call me. The investigator handed her a business card. Here's my phone number. Call me at any time. Don't hesitate. I won't keep you any longer. Thank you for your information. Amanda left the investigative committee building with strange feelings. She had a haunting thought in her head. What if Kayla's death and her coat had something to do with their similarities? It's not a coincidence at all. If it is, then the perpetrator, having found out he was mistakenly targeted, may now be waiting around the corner somewhere for me too. Once home, Amanda began to frantically recall the events before she left for Israel. Amanda couldn't remember anything unusual, except her meeting with Kayla, but she now saw the incident in prison from a completely different perspective. When she was pregnant, she had been attacked in the shower room by 2 cellmates. They brutally beat her, after which Amanda lost the baby. No one punished her attackers, even though she pointed them out. And in the infirmary after the miscarriage and cleanup, when Amanda cried and wailed, Lord, why are you punishing me? Have I sinned so badly that even here you will continue to punish me? A passing doctor suddenly said, It is not God who is punishing you. God is too busy with his universal affairs to pay attention to pathetic people. He is deaf to our prayers. That's why people are forced to restore justice on their own. You got the punishment you deserve. You hurt people. You pay the price. What are you talking about? Who did I hurt? Amanda was surprised. I'm already paying for a stupid accident, a stolen human life, and my parents' grief. You're going to pay for a ridiculous 3 years in prison, the doctor said. It's not enough what happened to you. You should have died with your brood. Then the parents of the boy you killed would have some peace of mind. At the time, Amanda had thought the doctor was just being sympathetic to Bill's parents' grief, but now she wondered about the real reasons for this strange behavior. I didn't do anything to those women in prison. Why did they beat me up and didn't even say anything? They just beat me silently. They kicked me in the stomach on purpose. Who could have interfered with my child, she pondered. All roads led back to Bill's parents. If she got it right, the baby was a potential heir, not only after Bill's death, but also after his parents' deaths. But did they really have a hand up their own grandson? Amanda was horrified. We need to consult someone to untangle this tangle. With these thoughts in mind, Amanda left the house and headed to the notary. Since she hadn't signed up in advance, she had to wait in a long line. But Amanda was already determined to find out everything as soon as possible, so she bravely endured all the hardships of the notary. After a couple hours, it was finally her turn. She entered the notary's office. Behind a massive oak desk sat a man who was tired by this time and did not hide his irritation. "What is the matter?" he asked sharply, without looking up at Amanda. "I would like to consult," the visitor answered timidly. "But if you're here, consult. What exactly is your question?" "You see, my husband Bill died 3 years ago. I did not inherit, but I was pregnant by him at the time of his death. The baby was never born. I wanted to know if my child would have been entitled to anything if it had been born." "Why ask about something that will never happen?" The notary brushed it off. "As a matter of fact, there is no child now. Accordingly, what does it matter what would have happened if he were alive? If only." "Understand that this is very important," Amanda patiently objected. "The fact is that I lost my child for a reason. I was brutally beaten, kicked in the stomach. I suspect it was done purposefully to get rid of a potential heir. So I wanted to find out what my child could possibly be entitled to, and could this have been the cause of his death? Please help me figure this out." "Yes. I see that the case is really serious and complicated," sighed the notary. "Do you have any documents about your husband's death?" "I only have a certificate from the registry office. They said that the certificate of dissolution of marriage in this case is not issued. Bill's parents got the death certificate. They handled the funeral." "All right, let's get what we got. Let's check the probate registry." "It's going to take a while. The internet's slow today, and the databases are taking a long time to load. So it's out of my hands." "Yeah, you're lucky you got a fast download," said the notary. "Bill, there is one." He carefully began to study the contents of the inheritance file, and after a few minutes of concentrated reading turned a surprised face to the visitor. "You are right in your suspicions," he told Amanda. "They could have gotten rid not only of the unborn child, but also of you. Did you know that you were also an heiress, since your husband had no will? Your husband Bill was a very wealthy man. Not only did he have the usual real estate and other assets, but he owned several financial companies. I'm guessing someone didn't want to give them to you. Why didn't you inherit within the statutory period?" "I couldn't," Amanda mumbled, nervously tugging at the strap of her bag. "Were you in the hospital?" suggested the notary. "I was serving time in a penal colony for the manslaughter of my husband," Amanda exhaled, and she felt better after hearing the truth. "What a twist." The notary leaned back in his chair. "And how long have you been out of the colony?" "A little over a month ago." "So you should then urgently apply to the court with a petition to restore the missed period of entry into the inheritance due to the rents. This is given 6 months after the grounds preventing the entry into the inheritance no longer exist. So we advise you do not delay with this case, and in the near future submit an application. Attach a certificate from the penitentiary to the application." "Thank you very much," Amanda thanked the notary. "You're welcome. I hope that our fears will not be confirmed, and that you will not be in danger after submitting this application. Good luck to you." Amanda walked out of the notary's office with a trembling, excitement-seeking heart. The sun had already completed its daily run across the sky, and it was getting dark outside. It was the end of March, so it was getting dark early. "What am I going to do now?" Amanda thought. "If it really is all about that damned inheritance." She dug into her bag and pulled out the investigator's business card from there. Amanda remembered that the investigator had said to let her know if any new information came up. She dialed the number on the card. The phone rang with a long beep. A few seconds later, an angry male voice answered. "Yes, go ahead," he said. "Hello, it's Amanda. Remember I came to see you yesterday about Kayla Brown and her fur coat?" The caller recalled her recent visit. "Yes, of course I remember." The investigator's voice warmed noticeably. "Did something happen to you?" "I just came from the notary. He said I can still claim the inheritance from my husband Bill's death." And there's a lot of property there, including whole companies. The notary said that this could very well be the motive for the assassination attempt. So get back to the notary's office immediately and don't leave. Call a cab and come to me immediately. I don't talk to anyone and don't move until the cab arrives. On the way, don't call or pick up anyone. Do you understand me? Your life is in grave danger. I'm absolutely sure of that now. Amanda followed the investigator's instructions exactly, and in half an hour she was back in his office. Amanda, in all likelihood your parents-in-law have put a decent bounty on your head, the investigator said, and they probably know by now that the previous assassination attempt was a complete failure. I doubt that will stop them. But while the investigation into Caleb Brown's murder is ongoing, they may be laying low for a while, so we're going to have to bait them. How? Amanda asked in surprise, not yet realizing what the investigator was suggesting. The notary advised you to apply for reinstatement of the inheritance. Is that correct? Yes, Amanda confirmed. File it, and not only do it, but notify your in-laws, so we know they've gotten the information they need. But that could provoke them. Amanda was frightened, realizing where the investigator was going with this. Right, he nodded. That's the idea, the investigator nodded. We need to provoke them. If they really were trying to kill you but mistook you for Kayla because of the fur coat you gave her, then this is our chance to catch them red-handed and put them away for a long time. That's the only way you'll be safe. You know what I'm talking about. I think so, don't you? Amanda answered uncertainly. Good, I will introduce you to operatives from tomorrow. They'll be watching you at all times, so don't worry about that. But please, even if you find yourself being followed, ignore them and pretend you don't notice anything. Is that a deal? Yes. Now call a cab again. And don't go anywhere until I call you. Tomorrow I'll let you know when you need to leave the house to file your application. While you're at home, get all the necessary paperwork ready. Okay, Amanda nodded. Her heart was pounding like a frightened rabbit, but she knew she had to do something to avoid living the rest of her life in fear. Waiting for someone to hit her over the head with a heavy weapon like Kayla, she hailed a cab and drove home. Amanda didn't say anything to her parents so as not to scare them. After calming down a bit, she went to the district court website. There she found the necessary application template and printed it out. Her father had all the necessary office equipment in his office. After filling out the form and making copies of the attached documents, Amanda took a breath. Now all that was left to do was wait for the investigator to call. She already had everything ready for the next step. That night, Amanda slept restlessly again. The nightmares never stopped haunting her. This time she dreamt of Kayla. She stood in the middle of some dark room, pale as death, and stared frighteningly at Amanda without saying anything. Suddenly some black shadows appeared and dragged a scared-to-death Kayla somewhere. She clung desperately to anything she could get her hands on, breaking her bloody fingernails. And Amanda heard her heartbreaking scream. Son. At that moment, Amanda finally managed to overcome the obsession and jumped up as if she had just witnessed the nightmarish events in her dream. Her heart was racing again, she was short of breath, and a cold, clammy sweat broke out on her forehead. Oh God, Kayla really did have a little boy. I completely forgot about him and all the commotion, Amanda thought as she looked at her watch. It was 3:15 in the morning. I'm not going to get any more sleep after that nap. I better make some coffee, she muttered, and headed for the kitchen. The coffee finally chased away the remnants of sleep, and her head felt clearer. Amanda shook off the memories of the nightmare and went to get ready for a new day. You gotta be ready. Who knows when the investigator will call, she reasoned. Amanda was not wrong in her calculations. Being a man, the investigator was not going to get into the female nuances of the necessary preparation for going out. At 8:00, the phone rang. Of course, it was him. Hello? Amanda answered. Hi, this is Detective Brown. I already have your number on file. Yesterday I made all the necessary paperwork, and today you are already assigned to operatives. You can go to court first thing in the morning. I don't think there's a minute to lose. Every delay is a new opportunity for those who are hunting you now. We don't know yet if your in-laws attacked Kayla or if they hired someone, so be careful and remember all my instructions. Typical man, Amanda thought to herself and hung up the phone. A good thing I woke up from this nightmare at 3 a.m. and had time to clean myself up. Otherwise, I'd have to explain to the investigator why I couldn't go to court this morning. Even yesterday, Amanda had familiarized herself with the district court schedule. They opened at 9:00, so with the drive, it was a good time to leave the house. Amanda waited in another line, now in the reception area of the court. and sighed with relief when the bureaucratic procedure of filing one single piece of paper, which had caused her to sit so long in the general line in the court corridor, was finally over. On her way out, she sent a quick message to the investigator via messenger. Statement filed. On my way home. A minute later, she got a reply. Great, take a cab home. And from home write to your mother-in-law and inform her that the term of entry into the inheritance is restored. As you write, send me a screenshot of your message. And if then you get a response, it is also a screen, and forward everything to me. Amanda made it home safely. Despite the police officers assigned to her, she was still haunted by the feeling of fear that had haunted her since the night before. Now that Amanda knew that her mother-in-law might have been involved in Kayla's murder, and that Amanda, not she, should have been their victim, she was having periodic panic attacks. Her heart was pounding desperately in her chest because of its frantic rhythm, and the oxygen wasn't getting to her brain in the right amount, making her short of breath and dizzy. I had to stop and catch air with my mouth, like a fish thrown on the shore. After taking a sedative, Amanda texted her mother-in-law. Hello Grace, this is Amanda, notifying you that I have applied for reinstatement of my inheritance. I hope this doesn't cause any problems. Amanda took a screenshot of her smartphone screen with this message and immediately forwarded it to the investigator. About 10 minutes later, the phone vibrated, notifying her of the incoming message. The mother-in-law couldn't take it anymore. The messenger reflected a whole tirade of her fiery speeches. How could you, bitch, have the conscience to do this? It's not enough that my son was murdered, but now you're going to get your hands on our property. You'll never get your inheritance. I'll lay down my bones, but I won't give you a penny. God knows I didn't want this for my son. Who could have known that you would turn out to be such a bastard and kill Bill on purpose so that you could run your bloody paw into our business? Grace screamed. Damn the day, Oliver and I decided to marry Bill to you, so he wouldn't get mixed up with a troublesome wench. And Kayla would have been better off with her by now, so he'd still be alive. And now they're both silent. And maybe they'll be happy in the next world. But you should be rotting in your grave in their place, you bastard. Damn your whole family. They taught you how to inherit your husband's share of the business as soon as he dies. Damn you and your parents to hell. Cursing all of you to the seventh knee, Amanda did not answer anything, just secured the correspondence and sent it to the investigator again. A few minutes later, a reply came back from him. Wonderful. You can see that your mother-in-law is nervous, and she clearly did not like your intention to enter the inheritance. And when a person is very nervous, he begins to think badly and can do something stupid. That's where we're going to catch her. They're already aware of Kayla's death, and there's a circumstantial admission that you should be in Kayla's shoes. What's my next move? Amanda checked with the investigator. Write to your mother-in-law and tell her you'll go to the notary by tomorrow to apply for inheritance. Amanda followed the investigator's instructions. I'm sorry Bill is dead, but he's gone. And you and I are alive, so we can resolve this issue in a civilized manner. Tomorrow I will go to the notary who has the inheritance file to apply for the inheritance. I hope you won't prevent me from doing so. The mother-in-law received the message but did not reply. Amanda woke up the next day, determined. Today would decide her fate, or would she help the investigation catch Kayla's real killers and save her life? Or would it turn out that her mother-in-law had nothing to do with it? I mean, there's a chance it's just an unfortunate coincidence. The investigator instructed Amanda that she should get out of the cab at the beginning of the street and walk to the notary's office. This would increase the chances of the scheme succeeding. Amanda got out of the cab and, barely able to resist the urge to look around for operatives and pursuers, walked to the notary's office. On the way, she had to pass through a small public garden. It was empty and deserted at this time of year. Amanda walked down the alley, straining her hearing. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Amanda tensed up, but she didn't let on, she just picked up her pace. The man walking a little behind her also quickened his pace. Amanda was gripped by a terrible fear. She could no longer resist, absorbed in the noise of her own terror, and almost sprinted. The man behind her was getting closer, but Amanda, acting on the investigator's instructions, didn't turn around. Her nerves gave way. Amanda stopped abruptly. No stranger's footsteps could be heard either. Then she ran and was startled to hear the stomping of feet approaching her. Then she felt a sharp push in her back. Someone attacked her from behind and threw her to the ground. Amanda clung to the ground, squeezed her eyes shut, and clenched into a ball, instinctively covering her head with her hands in anticipation of a blow. But there was none. Then she heard the sound of some kind of commotion. When she opened her eyes, Amanda saw that two young men were twisting a third man who was struggling desperately. Finally, they managed to handcuff him, after which one of them approached Amanda, helped her up from the ground, and said, "Citizen, are you all right?" "I think so," Amanda replied quietly, still reeling from what had happened. "Then you also stay here to testify. We are police officers," explained the guy who addressed her. "This man tried to hit you on the head with this crowbar. We prevented the attempt in time. Now we're going to bring in medics and specialists to examine the scene and remove traces of the crime. And then you'll have to come with us to the station," they told her. "Okay, if you say so," Amanda whispered, pale as death. The paramedics arrived and examined Amanda and noted the marks of her fall to the ground. There were abrasions on her palms and knees. She had rolled across the pavement during her fall to the ground. Her new pantyhose were ruined because they couldn't withstand the bumps in the city asphalt. It was good that her coat was not short, and its flaps could cover her skinned knees, which had been treated by the medical staff with some healing solution. The scratches stung. But Amanda had clearly learned from childhood that wounds should not be touched with hands, even if they itched terribly. After examining the scene, the perpetrator and his victim were loaded into a service vehicle and taken to the nearest police station. Investigator Brown arrived there shortly afterward. He took Amanda aside. "Now our bait has worked. The trap is sprung. Now we're going to find out who's behind this. I bet it's your mother-in-law. They hired this felon, and he's the one who killed Kayla. I don't believe in coincidences like that." "What about the mother-in-law? Won't they be arrested?" Amanda wondered. "Have a little patience. You just want everything at once, like in detective shows. That's not how life works. We've got the perpetrator. He'll lead us to our clients. And when we have a confession from your attacker and your mother-in-law, then it's their turn." Caught red-handed, the perpetrator at first tried to pretend he didn't know what he was suspected of. "Warden, you're insulting me. Why are you trying to pin someone else's case on me? I didn't assault anyone, not now, not ever. It was this citizen who started hurting me out of the blue, tripped and fell. I didn't lay a finger on her," Tyler said. "It was a special operation, and all the events are recorded on video, where you can clearly see how you pushed the victim from behind, and when she fell, swung the crowbar to hit her on the head," the investigator countered. "It was at that moment that our operatives arrived and disarmed you, so it's useless to deny it. We have everything recorded, and we can clearly see your face there," said Investigator Brown. Tyler, who was being questioned, was staring at the operative with his small eyes. It was evident that the criminal brain was now working hard and analyzing the situation. "If you, Tyler, want to get the pike, you need to be friends with us," the operative continued. The suspect immediately tensed up, and although he tried to pretend that he didn't care, it was obvious that he was listening attentively, and the operative continued to process him. "Tell us who ordered the assassination attempt on Citizen Amanda, and you'll be happy. You'll earn yourself bonuses for cooperating with the investigation. And if you remember something else interesting, you might even be a witness in the case. You didn't come up with all this on your own, did you? We're all human beings. We're all driven by necessity. And some rich guy offers to make a quick buck, bash some broad's head in. Who'd turn that down?" The criminal was silent, thinking over the pros and cons. He didn't know what else the police had on him, so he was afraid to blab and say too much. "My patience is not infinite, and the offer is one time, so you don't have much time to think." The operative raised his voice and began to press. "If now you play silent, we will prove your involvement. Believe me, we have enough evidence for that. And then we will calm you down to the fullest, and there will be no leniency for you. So what do you have in mind?" "Dried it up," Warden Tyler said dryly. "Her relatives made it up." "What relatives? Whose?" the investigator interjected. "That won't do. Tell me what you mean. Why do I have to pull every word out of you?" He was indignant. Tell so that it was clear, and do not pretend, and state everything as it is, as if for the first time handed over the layout. "I've already memorized your biography by heart. You're a big name in the criminal world, so don't play innocent." "I was talked out of going after this lady," and her father-in-law Tyler continued. "They said she killed their son and should pay for it." "What exactly did they ask you to do?" Investigator Brown asked. "Get rid of their daughter-in-law by any means necessary." "What is meant by the word get rid of? Did they explain it to you?" "Yeah, I thought maybe just maim her to keep her out of the way. But the woman who talked to me made it clear that she wants to see her sister-in-law in a coffin, and she hopes I will fulfill her request. And she would not be in debt and would generously pay for my services. But they promised to pay the full amount only after the result." "How much did they promise you for such a trifle?" $50,000 at once and another $100,000 later." "And where's the money already?" "I owed child support. I paid some of it, spend some of it on food. What a noble thing to do, said Investigator Brown. You decided to give the money for the murder to the kid. Do you think that's the only way to get God's forgiveness? You don't need to scare God out of me, Warden Tyler snapped. Where was God when I was being beaten mercilessly by my alcoholic stepfather? Why did God let me run away from home to save my own skin? I was raised on the streets. You think I was a criminal from the time I was in diapers? Oh, don't tell me your heartwarming stories. The operative waved away. Many people have a hard life, but only a few become criminals. Those who follow the path of least resistance. It's easier to steal than to make money. Tyler frowned and shut down. The operative, realizing he'd made a mistake, decided to rectify the situation. Sorry, Tyler. It's not your fault. It's just a crazy day. Do you have the coordinates of the customers? I do, the suspect mumbled. You seized my cell phone. All the contacts are there. The operative pulled out the items seized during the personal search. Tyler had an old smartphone with broken glass in the bag. Is this your phone? He asked. Yeah, it's password protected. It doesn't have a function like your customers are recorded, Aunt Anya, the executor, muttered. That's original, the police officer smirked. Operative Brown flipped through the calls, took some notes and pictures. Okay, Tyler, you're done for the day. If you think of anything else, let the duty officer know. Suspect has been taken away. The operative relayed the information to Detective Dustin. A couple hours later, the investigative committee and police cars arrived at Brown's house. Investigator Dustin and 2 police officers cordoned off the building just in case. Dustin went to the front door. The police officers hid themselves so that they could not be seen through the surveillance cameras. But if anyone was watching the image or from the window, these precautions were useless. Dustin rang the doorbell. A dog barked in the yard, but the house showed no signs of life. The investigator rang it again. Young man, we're not going to buy anything from you, and we're not going to join any cults. Go away with God, a woman's voice came through the intercom. Grace, open up, please. I'm from the investigative committee. There are new developments in your son's murder case. I need to talk to you about it. There was silence. But after a few seconds, the electronic lock clicked, announcing that the door had opened. Dustin, followed by the 2 policemen, walked through the yard to the barking of the yard dog. On the threshold of the house stood the landlady. Her face reflected a look of extreme concern. What is the progress in my son's case? Bill's mother asked anxiously. Did you prove that the bastard shot on purpose? Not exactly. But you're very close to the truth, Dustin replied. Where's your husband? Why do you need him? Grace was wary. I don't want to repeat the same information twice. It would be better if you called him, and then we could tell you both the purpose of our visit. He's in the kitchen. I'll go get him. The landlady disappeared into the back of the room and returned a moment later, accompanied by her husband. Grace and Oliver Brown, said Investigator Dustin. Yes, the owners of the house confirmed with one voice. You are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder of Amanda Brown, they said in words that Grace and Oliver did not understand. The police handcuffed them and led them out of the house, putting them separately into 2 different service vehicles parked nearby, so that the suspects could not talk to each other about anything on the way. They were also questioned separately. Grace, your husband has already confessed, so there's no use in denying it, Dustin told the suspect after another one of her excuses. Moreover, your accomplice Tyler had ratted you both out earlier, so we have more than enough evidence to prove your guilt. I just feel sorry for you as a human being. As a mother, I know exactly what you're going through. My mom would cut anyone's throat for me too, so I'd like to do something to help you. But you're stubborn, and you're doing your own time with your lies. Son, if you understand, then why did you arrest me? Why don't you say anything? It's not my fault. Of course you are not guilty, nodded the investigator. Without you, I got you confused and led you astray. Repent, and you'll feel better immediately. Is that the price of a traffic accident? Sins to God and the priest. And here there is neither, answered Grace, still hoping to get away with it. The coroner is better off than any priest. He can repent of anything, especially if it's a felony. Grace, for the last time, I suggest you don't make things worse and come clean like your husband did. Otherwise, you will not see him again soon, because he will get the minimum penalty and you will get the maximum. Because of your age, you won't be able to go free, except with your feet in front of you. Would your son want that for his mother? Why don't you give him any peace even in the afterlife? Grace could not bear it and cried. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed loudly. My son, on whom did you leave me and my father? Is there no world for us now that you are gone? Grace, drink some water, the investigator suggested, holding out a glass of water to the suspect. Grace drank the water and kept quiet. Grace, if you're not cooperating, then I'm going to have to confront you, Brown said. The investigator called someone on the phone, and in 5 minutes Amanda entered the office. What's that bastard doing here? The suspect immediately lost her composure. I warned you. Grace, you didn't want to cooperate with the investigation, so we're forced to resort to additional means of extracting evidence. There will now be a confrontation between you and the victim, the investigator reminded us. Who's the victim here? She's the victim, Grace shrieked. Yes, I'm the one who suffered at the hands of this murderer. My husband and I should be recognized as victims, and that bastard should be put away for life. He shouldn't be allowed to walk the earth and smoke the light of day. Grace, I must ask you to refrain from insulting me, said Brown. I understand you know a citizen named Amanda Brown. That bitch still hasn't changed her last name, the mother-in-law boiled again. How the hell do you do it? She killed my son to put her filthy hand in our family fortune, and you have the nerve to use his last name after his murder. Grace, please calm down, Brown asked her. Do you have it on record, Mr. Investigator? The suspect addressed him. I demand that she be deprived of the right to bear my deceased son's surname. She has no right to bear his surname after what she did to him. But you know what that bitch did. She shot him point blank with a shotgun, and then said it was an accident, and she only got 3 years for cold-blooded, premeditated murder. What's 3 years for the life of a young guy who had everything ahead of him? We don't have that kind of authority. If you think she doesn't have the right to carry your son's last name, go to court, Brown said. There's another issue at stake here. You say you never threatened your daughter-in-law. That's not what she's saying, and even showed screenshots of your correspondence with her where you cursing her, saying that in the place of Kayla Brown and your son in the grave should rot in the grave Amanda. By the way, how did you know Kayla Brown was dead? I don't remember. I think it was in the papers, the suspect replied in a panic. What about the threats against Amanda? Don't call her that, the suspect whispered. Okay, what about the threats against Amanda Brown? I have every right to do that after she took my son from me. What, now a mother can't even threaten her son's killer if the state can't deliver justice? But you've gone much farther in your search for justice, haven't you? The investigator noted. Tyler told us how he mistakenly killed another woman because of you. He's very angry with you, because now instead of 1 crime, he's got 2 murders and an attempted murder. You could have given us a better picture so we wouldn't have to identify the target by his fur coat. You didn't think of that. How could they not? We thought of everything, but the fur coat was a bust, said the suspect. Who made stupid Kayla wear that damn coat that day? It was her own fault. If she hadn't, she'd be alive right now. I didn't tell you it was about Kayla, the investigator said. Well, now that you're being honest, I'll tell you a secret. We found the cabin where Kayla Brown was killed. Tyler wasn't smart enough to change the weapon, so he followed Amanda with the same shotgun Mike used. And our forensics found traces of DNA on it belonging to Kayla Brown and, of course, Tyler's handprints and DNA. We also have his confession, including evidence against you and your husband Brown, continued. It was you he named as the person who ordered the murder of Amanda Brown, and it was you who gave him the wrong tip-off by poorly describing the alleged victim and giving a photo of her wearing the same fur coat that was later found on the murdered Kayla Brown, anything to add her object. Grace remained silent, only occasionally casting angry glances at either the investigator or her sister-in-law. Grace, have you been proven guilty yet? Brown asked. We have already collected the necessary materials in a sufficient volume for the court, so our conversations are more moral than legal. The suspect shifted her gaze to Oliver Brown. You do not hide your hatred for the victim, continued the investigator, are sure that she is guilty of the death of your son, and that she did it deliberately, out of selfish motives, in order to gain possession of your family fortune. So the motive is clear. The accomplices, including your husband, have confessed, willingly cooperated with the investigation, and point to you as the main initiator of this atrocity, so the court will have no doubt of your guilt. And your husband, Grace asked. Your feeling is that he is old, so he will serve his 3 years and go free with a clear conscience. And so Bill won't have to forge on a loan while you're in the dungeons praying, so he'll get himself a young woman. And it was worth it to be so angry at your daughter-in-law, so that then 10 years to trample the zone and lose her husband. Brown grinned. It was worth it, Grace said. If I had to, I'd do a lot more than that for my son. That bastard shouldn't live after what she's done. And if neither the court of earth nor the court of God wants to get involved, then I've been doing it myself. With these words, Grace jumped up with incredible agility for a woman of her age and threw herself at Amanda like an angry cat protecting kittens. The investigator barely had time to run up to unhook her from Amanda. The suspect fought back violently. They had to call an escort because Oliver couldn't handle this woman who seemed to be off the chain. The distraught women fought to the death. The medics arrived and found numerous abrasions not only on Amanda, but also on Investigator Brown. Grace's nail layer was removed and her broken nails were photographed, which she had damaged in a desperate attempt to scratch out the eyes of her hated sister-in-law. The incident that took place only added to the guilt of the icy mother-in-law. She eventually gave up under the weight of the charges and confessed to everything. The investigator summoned Amanda to inform her that the case file has been submitted to the court. "Well, that's it," Brown said. "Amanda Brown, I have done everything in my power to ensure that the guilty do not escape responsibility. It's up to the court and the prosecutor's office to take it from here." "Thank you so much," Amanda replied. "You've done more for me than anyone I've ever known in my entire life, and Kayla can rest in peace now. Her killers will now receive the punishment they deserve. By the way, do you know what happened to her baby? She had a young son, no more than 3.5 years old." Yes, of course," Brown nodded. "I remember when we found Kayla Brown's body. She had a passport with a stamp on it that said she had a minor child. That's how we found out about the kid. Thank God he wasn't alone for long." The door was opened, and in the presence of witnesses and guardianship authorities, the baby was taken first to the hospital. And then the guardianship authorities took him away. "I don't know where to, but I can ask the Juvenile Affairs Department. They cooperate with the guardianship authorities." "Please find out if it's not too much trouble," Amanda asked. "The thing is, this kid is my late husband Bill's son. If he has no other relatives, I want to take care of him. I promised his mother Kayla." "I understand," the investigator nodded. "It's a guilty conscience. After all, you are indirectly responsible for the death of both his parents. What a strange fate for this child." Brown called the juvenile department, and within 10 minutes he had the address of the orphanage where little Tyler Brown had been sent. "Wow, Kayla didn't tell me she named her son after Bill," Amanda remarked. Sometime later, Amanda and her mother Grace came to the orphanage to meet Kayla's son. The caregivers brought the toddler into the director's office. He shrank fearfully toward the woman who had brought him to the orphanage and peered warily with his big blue eyes and thick eyelashes at the strange women. Amanda looked at the baby and her heart squeezed. She had seen baby pictures of her husband Bill. The baby holding on to the caregiver looked like 2 drops of water, like her late husband. "That's our Tyler Brown," said the director of the orphanage, smiling. "We don't usually show the children separately. We have an open house and a database for that, but this is a special case. Our people are superstitious." Someone quickly spread information about the tragic death of his biological mother. "They're telling all sorts of stories, like his own grandmother hired a hitman, and he mistakenly killed her daughter-in-law instead of the real one. And the rest of the story is crazy. How can people think of such things? The grandmother allegedly wanted revenge on her daughter-in-law for killing her son, and this son was forcibly married by his parents. And when his wife was alive, he ran to another wife, who then gave birth to our Tyler, and the wife found out about it and killed the traitor with a shotgun. Can you imagine what people make up?" "Yeah, they make up all sorts of stories," Amanda agreed and looked at Grace's mother. "And the poor kid can't find a family because of all the gossip around his relatives," the director of the social institution lamented. "As soon as they find out his personal data, everyone starts asking if this is not the same Brown, whose son killed her mother-in-law with the help of a killer. And it just goes on and on. I don't know what to do about it anymore. You could change the kid's last name." "I don't need to change anything," Amanda said firmly. "I'm going to adopt this boy. Please prepare me a list of documents that I must submit with the application." "You want to adopt him right away?" the director asked. "How about a temporary guardianship to start with? Or a foster family? It often happens that people take a child, and then they are disappointed and want to return it." "But canceling guardianship is one thing," the director said. "Adoption is a lot more complicated." "I'm not going to revoke the adoption," Amanda said firmly. "I knew both his parents well. That's why I'm not afraid of the rumors floating around about this baby, nor of any difficulties with his upbringing. Raising him is my moral obligation to his parents." The director looked into the eyes of this confident and well-to-do woman. She realized that little Tyler would be in good hands, and since the adoptee knew his parents personally, there was no better guardian for him. Meanwhile, Amanda wasted no time. She restored the term for the entry into the inheritance and formalized the inheritance share due to her under the law, which by its scope of property rights allowed her and her baby to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. While the inheritance and adoption were being processed, The court sentenced Tyler Brown and the Oliver couple. The first really got a break for active assistance to the investigation, and he was given 5 years in a penal colony of general regime. But the Olivers were not helped by their loud statements at the trial about the case of honor and revenge for the murdered son. The court did not consider it a mitigating circumstance, and it was not a state of effect either. As a result, both received 10 years each in a general regime colony. So justice, which they both advocated for, did prevail. Amanda, leaving little Tyler, his real name Brown, took him to Miami, where there was a lot of sun and a lot of sea resorts for every taste. They settled into a small villa on the beach and gratefully greeted each new morning. Breakfast, flowers, grapes on the veranda, Amanda said. Eat your fruit, Tyler, and get your strength back. You and I have great things ahead of us. You're going to grow up to be a great man. Maybe you'll become a great surgeon and save lives, or even an astronaut. All doors are open to you, kid, and it's up to you to decide which one you enter. Too much. Andrew was in a lot of pain. Emily's pain faded into the background. She was scared out of her mind. 3 weeks passed, but Andrew still couldn't recover. He couldn't eat. He felt like he was the reason William had left the family. Andrew, it's not your fault, his mother tried to convince him. It's just that your father betrayed you and me. Then I didn't listen to him. I went to play with those boys, the son cried. They were smoking. Dad found out and thought I smoked with him. He didn't forgive me. He didn't love me after that. Emily clutched her head. Andrew felt so much guilt that there seemed to be no way out of it. A month passed and Emily decided to file for divorce after all. She had gained some moral strength. William knew about it right away. He got in his car, headed for his mother-in-law and father-in-law's house. He didn't know what to do next. On the one hand, he loved Emily and his son. The latter was very dear to him, but everything in their lives had become monotonous. He wanted new impressions. He began to feel that he was getting old. Perhaps that's what drove him to adventure. Irene Alexis, Gregory Myron, his son-in-law, lowered his head. I ask you to speak to me. The father-in-law looked at him angrily. He would have loved to punch him in the face. But Irene Alexis was a mother herself. She was worried about both Emily and Andrew. Billy, she sighed. Do you realize the pain you've caused them? But what were you missing? I don't know, he shrugged. I want to apologize to Emily. I love her. I want to go back to them. I seriously doubt she'll take you back. My mother-in-law said with annoyance in her voice. But what were you thinking? You've got a mistress under your nose. But you will come back. And how will you live? Emily will see the tank all the time. We'll leave here. Suddenly declared son-in-law. There won't be any tank there. Where to? My father-in-law entered the conversation. Do you think the rumor about you will not reach there? He scolded. Anyway, Emily's parents promised to talk to her. Naturally, she didn't want to hear about her husband's return. Mom, don't tell me anything about him, she said angrily. I hate him. I'll divorce him. Emily, listen to me, Irene Alexis tried to look at the problem from every angle. I don't care what you decide. But I'm asking you to think about Andrew. The child is suffering. And it was true. Emily burst into tears. Her heart couldn't bear the sadness of her son. He thought of his father all the time, and the fact that William hadn't shown up all this time made it worse. And then the day came when Andrew didn't come home from school. When Emily was on duty, his grandfather would pick him up, but the woman's father reported that Andrew didn't show up today. Emily called in a substitute to cover her shift. Of course, there was nothing the police could do. So they searched for Andrew on their own. Billy, Irene said excitedly to Alexis. Andrew's missing. Has he come to see you? No, he said worriedly. I'll be right over, he promised and got into the car. As much as Emily felt bad, she didn't say anything. Everyone started looking for Andrew. They found him at one of the playgrounds. "Oh, my son." His mother rushed over to him. "Demochka." She started kissing the child. "Daddy." When he saw William, he rushed to him. "Daddy," cried the boy. You could say that that incident had determined everything. As much as Emily didn't want to, she made the choice to reconcile with William because of her son. Everyone sat at Emily's parents' house and had a serious conversation. "We're going to move to another town," the son-in-law said at once. Andrew didn't take a step away from him. Emily agreed. She realized that no matter how womanizer was her husband, he sincerely loved his son. Perhaps that was why William had just taken a mistress. Emily had no intention of leaving her family, but that didn't make her feel any better. Cheating was still cheating, no matter how you looked at it. 2 months later, they sold the house, and Emily and her family moved to a neighboring town, which was 70 kilometers away. They bought a small house, as it was a more promising place, and accordingly, life was more expensive. Emily got a job as a post nurse in one of the hospitals. William found a crew and started doing repairs with them. Such services were in great demand. Andrew recovered quickly, enjoyed going to his new school, and made friends very quickly. Emily's life, despite the fact that she was doing the same things as before, seemed to take a new direction. "Why don't we have a baby?" her husband once said to her. "A child would bring us joy." "I'm not ready yet," she sighed. "I've been traveling a lot in the last year, but you're already 38. Where else can I put it off?" He objected. "And I'm not getting any younger either. I'm already 42. You can't say Emily got married late. She was 25. It's just that her job was stressful, so you can't get pregnant right away. "Let's revisit this conversation in 6 months," the wife asked. Still, Emily had her doubts. She kept thinking that the day would come when William would cheat on her again. "There won't be any more cheating," she assured herself. "We're fine. Why should our past determine our future?" But no matter how much she set herself up for the best, her intuition told her that something was bound to happen in her life. Maybe that was the real reason Emily didn't want a second child. It was May. Emily and her family had already been living in the new place for 8 months. Everyone had gotten used to it and had no idea how they had lived in their hometown a year ago. Andrew had grown up. He had already turned 11. The boys in the new school were more advanced. The boy had somehow grown up quickly. He was very seriously interested in modeling. He and 2 of his friends went to a children's club where they built various ships and scale. "Very beautiful," praised Andrew's mother. "Son, how do you have the patience?" She laughed. "I would not be able to sit for hours and collect it all by crumbs." "You know, how interesting," Andrew said proudly. "We're going to exhibit in a competition." It wasn't that Andrew had grown cold to his father, but it was noticeable that he was now more interested in his friends than in his father. They still talked occasionally, especially when it came to their son's hobbies. But Emily could see that they had not become friends, and William was very tired. Sometimes there were urgent works, so that he could not even spend the night at home. And so Emily's life flowed in a new direction, and a few words about her work. In principle, the teen was nothing. Emily immediately made a friend from the children's ward. The only one. The head therapist was a cold man. He even seemed stiff from the outside. And since Emily worked in his department, she still didn't understand how to communicate with him. Gregory Myron didn't seem to notice anyone. He was strict, but acted so professionally that without any doubt he could be called not only the best doctor of the hospital, but also of the whole region. Many, very many people bowed down to his talent, not that he admitted it. He paid no attention at all to rumors or anyone in his direction. He was constantly focused on his work. From the outside, it seemed that he could solve any task. There were enough instances where he alone was able to determine the true cause of an illness, and a man who was almost dying was discharged a month later. Gregory Myron didn't look like his usual self either. His hair was almost gray, but his face looked quite young. About 6 months later, Emily learned that he was only 47. It was Emily's shift when the doctor approached her. He looked concerned. "Emily," he said, "I need to pick you up for about an hour. I'll get Annie to keep an eye on the post. We're going to see a patient in 20 minutes. Be ready." Emily nodded. She rushed to Annie's procedure nurse. She informed her that the doctor had already spoken to her. "Annie, do you know what happened in there?" Emily asked. "He said it was a bad case," Annie replied. "There's an old woman. She's been in and out of the hospital a few times. Apparently she's gotten worse again. She has a son who keeps asking to be treated at home. And there's no room right now. I think that's why he's coming himself." Exactly 20 minutes later, the doctor came to pick Emily up and they headed to the address. Isaac Alexander was focused and silent. Emily was sometimes even afraid of his presence. He seemed sensual. So they reached the patient without a word. The doctor got out and headed for the entrance. The nurse hurried after him. The woman moaned. Emily's heart clenched. Isaac Alexander examined her and hesitated for a few moments. "Emily, take blood, urine," he said coldly. "I'll take a sample of the vomit myself." Isaac Alexander told the woman's son that he would call him in 2 days, and they would decide what to do. The doctor and the nurse went downstairs and got into his car. Isaac Alexander often drove his vehicle out on work-related errands, and Emily had never heard him ask his superiors for compensation. "I think it's something autoimmune," the doctor whispered. Emily flinched in surprise. "I think it's something masquerading as another disease," he continued. "How is that possible? Don't the tests tell us what the real cause is?" "You can do all the possible tests, ultrasounds and CT scans, and still not see the real cause," Isaac Alexander replied. "You see, we still don't know how the immune system works. We have only a superficial idea, like a small iceberg on the surface of the ocean, and a huge block hidden underwater. Too many factors affect this process. She has no serious diseases, no cancer. But she's falling apart before our eyes. What's happening to her? There's no answer. It's like something triggers and everything goes to hell. Then she goes into remission and everything's more or less fine." "What are you going to do with her?" Emily asked with interest. "Are you going to put her in the hospital?" "First we'll look at the tests," said Isaac Alexander. He stopped talking. They drove the rest of the way in silence, and Emily didn't ask any more questions. The workday continued, and she forgot about her morning commute. The night passed quietly, the May air putting her in a good mood. Emily lay on the couch and thought about her family. Maybe he's right, a thought popped into her head. Having a girl will strengthen our family. "Yeah, I'm getting sick of medicine." Emily felt herself tanning. For years she had been responsible in her work, but the fatigue was building up. She and William didn't have the opportunity to go anywhere on vacation. They were making a little more money, but living in the city meant more expenses. Andrew went to sports and a modeling class, which also required money. Will we be able to afford all this if we have a daughter, she wondered. Morning came. Emily cheered up. A couple more hours and she would be going home. She got up and went about her duties. The ward was quiet and she began filling out the many logs. It was almost 8 o'clock when Emily got ready to go home. Another nurse had come to take over her shift, and Emily told her what had happened in the meantime. There were 3 post nurses on the ward who were constantly changing. One of them was a very quiet woman. Lila was in her 50s and she usually didn't get involved in anything. But Amber, who came in now, was noted for her talkativeness and tendency to gossip. Closely, Amber jumped up to her. I have an anniversary in 3 days you are required to attend. Do you understand me? She burned a glare at her coworker. Yeah, I'll be working anyway, Emily smiled. What's your anniversary? She was confused. Well, of course it is. 40 years, Amber announced proudly. There's even going to be a robot. That's what coworkers called Isaac Alexander among themselves. Can you imagine? When I told him that, say, let's eat cake, drink juice, he nodded to me in agreement. I doubt he'll even eat the cake, Emily laughed. I've never seen him at a meal. Here's coffee. Yeah, he's weird in general, Amber whispered in her ear. I heard he couldn't save his wife, so he takes his anger out on everyone. What happened to her? Curiosity piqued Emily. Didn't know he was married? Yeah, she had something serious going on there. He fought for her life. Took her to New York for a couple years. But nothing helped, Amber quickly echoed. Although I can't imagine who would marry him at all. Do you think he used to be this unsociable? Isaac Alexander is a good doctor, Emily sighed. He's just unlucky. Well, as they say, keep it simple and people will reach out to you. The woman laughed. Okay, until the anniversary. Emily didn't much like her coworker's attitude toward the doctor. He was a genius. They didn't realize that. He may not have been able to save his wife, but he had helped hundreds, or even thousands of people, after all. The woman also thought about the fact that she didn't want to be present at all these meetings at work. It was enough that she had a friend in the children's ward. The rest of the staff didn't really get her attention. Emily walked into the house. Andrew was already at school and her husband William was at work. Despite the sleepless night, she didn't feel like sleeping. She sipped some hot tea and her body relaxed. Emily lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Thus began a new day for her. After lunch, Emily was already doing chores around the house. Dinner was on the stove. She was cutting a salad, went out to get some greens in the vegetable garden, and stopped. The smells of May wafted through the air. Emily had always dreamed of spending a few days watching spring come. But it had never worked out. There were always things to do at home, so she couldn't afford to just sit idle. Emily closed her eyes. It made the smells even more vivid. A bird sang to her left. It felt good. I want a daughter, she said out loud and laughed at her own thoughts. Her soul sang. In the evening, her husband William returned from work. Andrew had returned from modeling. His eyes were burning. He spent almost half an hour telling his mother about his new job. Emily looked at him and realized that her boy had grown up a lot. A couple more years and he would turn into a guy. Mom, we're going to a competition at the sports school. Can you give me some money? He remembered soccer. Sure, she patted him on the head. Son, how much do you need? I'll call your coach. Emily realized that her secret dream of quitting her job was simply unrealistic. She had always wanted her children to have a better life than she or her parents had. Her father and mother had done everything they could for her. But if they'd had the money, Emily would have chosen a different profession. Not to say she liked medicine. She had dreamed of becoming an architect or a designer as a child, but as they say, it didn't work out. Late in the afternoon, William returned. He ate quickly and went straight to bed. Emily marveled again at how their relationship with her son had changed in just over a year. Andrew was no longer as attached to William, perhaps still to his mother. But Emily could see that just a little more and Andrew would begin to live a life of his own already. How strange does it feel, she thought as she went to bed. Somehow I was sure that my son would always be a little boy who would depend on us. How quickly had things changed. The rest of the days flew by quickly. It was getting close to the weekend, which meant Emily had to go to work again. God, she'd completely forgotten about Amber. Emily remembered tonight. She needed to buy a gift. Nothing came to mind, and it was too late. Emily decided to give her coworker the money to buy what she wanted herself. As the morning began, The hustle and bustle began. Amber arrived at 9 with 2 large bags. She started setting the table. Emily was minding her own business. She took the history of the patient they had traveled to with the doctor at the time. The woman quickly ran her eyes over the test results. Yeah, nothing much, she sighed. There was a slight elevation in the proteins in the general analysis, but it wasn't critical, just a fraction of a percent. Isaac Alexander is probably right. What if it all works on the principle of a wave and there was a failure? Then the indicators normalized. But it's already having repercussions. That's several cycles in a row. Emily wasn't a doctor, so she didn't really look into the problem. She didn't have the knowledge or experience. Amber came in. Everyone is already in the nurse's room, she reported. Isaac Alexander looked tired. Everyone congratulated Amber. Emily slipped money into her pocket. The birthday girl glowed. Most importantly, we wish you a speedy marriage. Annie raised her juice glass. We're tired of waiting for you to find one. Did you find him? Amber said cryptically. You won't believe it, just like I wanted. Tall, dark hair, green eyes, dimpled chin, about my age. Wow, murmured the female half. Isaac Alexander was silent, but he looked pleased. He came up to me on the street, Amber cheered. He even wears a watch like I like, with a big face. Emily swallowed. Something niggled in her chest. She chased away the bad feeling. And my favorite name is William, Amber declared. Soon we'll be together, and I'll finally wear my wedding ring. The co-workers sat for half an hour, needing to return to their posts. Emily was pale. She didn't fully realize why she felt so heavy. The nurse walked over to her colleague, pretending to help her clear her desk. Amber, I'm so happy for you, Emily said. I hope your prince isn't married. He's in the process of getting a divorce, she said happily. Billy was unlucky with his wife, so it's her own fault she left him. Does he have children? Emily held her breath. Amber looked at her questioningly. I'm worried about you. I don't know what's going on. Well, yes, daughter, calmed the birthday girl. Why are you being such a baby? I'm not completely stupid. I know what I'm doing. Yes, Emily smiled wryly. Once again, I wish you well. Emily returned home the next day, but she still had her doubts. She could hardly wait until evening. It was about 11 p.m. when her husband returned. Hi, she went up to him. William, we hardly see each other. She lowered her eyes. Emily, what do you want? It's a big city. You can't just live here. You've got to make it work, he smiled. You know, I've been thinking about it, and I think you're right. I want to have a daughter, his wife said suddenly. William was taken aback at first, then put his arms around Emily and kissed her. I'm glad you said yes, he said in a pleased tone. It will be good for both of us. Emily calmed down that evening, falling asleep in her husband's loving arms. She didn't want to think about Amber or her fiancé anymore. Nearly 2 more weeks passed. Emily had already forgotten what had happened at her co-worker's anniversary party. Emily arrived early that day. Amber was dealing with a difficult patient. She had her cell phone on her desk. Suddenly it rang. Emily glanced at the screen. It said, "Beloved," something hot pulsed through her entire body. There was no response, and the phone went silent. Amber walked over. Emily informed her that someone had called her. The woman immediately grabbed the phone, pressing all the same name. Emily somehow miraculously looked at almost every digit of the number, except the last 2. The magazine fell out of her hands, and she hesitated, but Amber had already gone to the window. In a soft voice, she was telling her lover something. Emily sat down at the table. Everything in her head was upside down. For her, it was a matter of life and death in two numbers. God, was that really pounding in her temples? Emily quickly grabbed her phone, called her husband. The phone was busy. Her heart nearly jumped out. She kept pressing and pressing William's number. Tears streamed from her eyes. Finally, the dial tone went off. Amber came to the table. "Emily, what's wrong?" "I'm at the facility," Billy's husband spoke quickly. "The landlord arrived, giving us a scandal. I called the supervisor." Emily didn't know what to say. "I was just worried," she barely said. "And for good reason." He sighed. "The boss won't pay us, and I'm so sick of it. You work, and then bang. For some reason we did nothing, and the house is shiny and the roof is intact, but somehow the owner doesn't see anything." Emily could barely contain herself, wiped away her tears, and went to the nurse's room. She was in a complicated emotional state. On the one hand, she felt like she was being cheated, and that made her seized with pain. On the other hand, she felt like it was all a coincidence, and she was just screwing with herself. "Emily, come here." The door opened suddenly, and in walked Dr. Isaac Alexander. It was still 30 minutes before the start of her shift. Isaac Alexander's request seemed odd. Emily cleaned herself up so as not to give away her tears and made her way to the doctor. He asked her to sit down. "I'm going on a business trip," he said seriously, "and I need an assistant. I've already made arrangements with the head doctor. Tell me, what about your family? Will it be possible for you to be away for a few days? I know you have a son." "Yes, Andrew is 11 now," the nurse replied, stammering. "He's independent. He mostly gets himself home from his training and club." In all her years at the hospital, this was the first time she'd ever been sent on a business trip. "All right then, Lily will be out tomorrow," Isaac informed Alexander. "And I'll pick you up at 8. Be ready." Emily sat back in her chair, but the doctor was already immersed in his work. The nurse had left. "Why me?" she whispered. "Wouldn't Amber be more suitable? She didn't have a family." It wasn't that Emily didn't want to go, but the whole thing seemed odd. Isaac Alexander never complimented her, and he never spoke to her except on business. Lily arrived in the evening, replacing Emily at the doctor's request. Now the nurses had to work together for a few days in 3 houses. Emily's husband couldn't believe his eyes. "What happened?" he asked. "I'm going on a business trip tomorrow," she said. "For 3 days. Billy, please take Andrew. He gets off much earlier than I do. It gets dark outside at 8 and he's home by half." "Mom, don't worry about me." Her son came up to her. "I'm not a little kid anymore." Yeah, she patted him on the head. "Andrew, you can already say that you are a man." "Have you sorted things out at work?" Billy asked. "Did you get paid?" "Yeah, our foreman came by with some guys. Anyway, they worked it out," he said. "Do you know what a drag this is? Last month we didn't get paid for the repairs, which is almost $25,000 each." Emily hadn't thought much about it, but now she saw that almost every month someone would underpay or deliberately lower the price. All in all, William's job was precarious. Emily sighed. In the morning, a car pulled up at 8 sharp. She grabbed her bag, headed to the doctor's office. He greeted her coldly. "Where are we going?" She couldn't help herself. "It's the first time I'm going on a business trip to a village," he replied calmly. "We will spend the night at my relative's house. The residents have recently had serious kidney problems, and the region has asked me to take a look. Will you help me take tests, give injections?" What could it be, Emily wondered. Some kind of waste being dumped. "That's the thing. There aren't any businesses there," Isaac Alexander replied. They sent me an ultrasound. His kidneys are in a deplorable state, even to the point of kidney failure. The hospital in the municipal center is already overcrowded. I'm looking at those who are at home now. The local paramedic can't cope. We'll take the blood and urine to the lab this afternoon. Emily realized they had a tough job ahead of them. It was about the critically ill. At almost 11 o'clock, they pulled into the village. It was like a ghost. The streets were empty. Isaac Alexander stopped near one house and entered himself. After a while, he called out to Emily as well. "The master is in the hospital now," he said. "He knows I'll be with you for a few days at his place. Don't be afraid." The medical staff quickly dropped their belongings and began to go door to door. The pain and suffering made Emily's blood boil in her veins. Many lay half asleep. The paramedic was giving them painkillers, as there was nothing else he could do. Emily saw Isaac Alexander coldly examining one patient after another. She took blood and urine for analysis and placed them in special containers. "Now into town," the doctor commanded. "We were promised emergency tests. We don't have much time." "What do you think? Did you find something?" Emily looked at him with interest. "Isaac Alexander, is this some kind of epidemic?" "No, I think it's something in the water," he replied. "I've already collected 5 samples from the wells. We'll stop at the river and the lake on the way now. We'll have to take a look." They quickly took all the necessary things and drove into town. The doctor was silent. He was thinking hard about something. "It looks like oil," the doctor's voice finally broke the silence. "The toxic effect of heavy metals. If there aren't any factories around here, then what is it?" Emily hesitated. "You know, the best way is to walk around the village with a metal detector. And everything will fall into place at once," the doctor sighed. "Some idiot buried some heavy metal residue somewhere. God knows what he did with them. But if we're talking about some kind of manufacturing, it's very possible." "But how? I mean, they check cars at checkpoints. How could they smuggle this stuff in?" "Well, lead, cadmium, arsenic, for example. I'm not sure about mercury. Aluminum doesn't have such an effect on humans. They're more afraid of it. But the others, it's enough to lose 5 or 10 pounds somewhere near the source. And they didn't do it now. Maybe 6 months ago. It's just that now it's all gone into the groundwater and it's coming out of the wells." The car stopped outside the local hospital. Emily realized they'd come to the next town over. This whole situation was freaking her out. Isaac Alexander took all the biological material to the laboratory and started talking to the head doctor. And Emily stood aside and thought about her own. Until almost 3 o'clock, the doctor was busy examining the injured patients. Unfortunately, 3 had already died. The kidneys were too seriously damaged. In addition, the small town hospital did not have expensive medicines. It was almost 8 when Isaac Alexander approached Emily again. She, too, helped him from time to time. "We're going home," he said. "We'll stop at some store on the way. Get something for dinner," the doctor offered tiredly. "Unfortunately, my relative hasn't gotten any better. All we can do is wait." "Emily, did you have to travel so much during the day that you couldn't even talk?" Isaac Alexander himself went to the store, bought food and water. Back in his college days, he made scrambled eggs in the kitchen. "Although you could say, nothing has changed in my life since those times. I'm not a foodie at all. I don't have enough time for that." "I'm not much of a cook either," Emily smiled, "although my family status obliges me to. But family is always a support," replied Isaac Alexander. "I can't say that I don't like loneliness," but sometimes he fell silent. "I heard that your wife died," Emily ventured. "I'm sorry." "Well, that was a long time ago," he sighed. "Besides, I'm so caught up in my work that I try not to think about it. Well, let's drink tea and go to bed. Tomorrow is not going to be an easy day. Perhaps we'll be able to get some results." Emily cleared the table Isaac Alexander showed her the room to make her own bed in the next room. The woman had already called her husband. He was home. Andrew was already asleep. The busy day kept Emily from returning to her thoughts. She closed her eyes. A green meadow appeared in front of her, and Emily heard some voices. The vision turned into a dream, and the woman fell deeply into it. She awoke abruptly. Though still light at heart, the dream did not bode well for her. She was marrying William, saw her beautiful dress, her veil. "Something will happen," she muttered, and she heard the door creak open. But something was catching. The doctor was already up, putting the kettle on in the kitchen. Emily came to her senses, and having changed her clothes, left the room. "Good morning," he said as dryly as before. "Let's have breakfast. We need to see the patients, and then we'll go back to the city." Both were silent, drinking coffee. Emily even liked Isaac Alexander's company. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. Toward the end, she couldn't take it anymore. "Why did you take me? After all, I have not worked with you for so long," she asked. "That's exactly the reason. I know the others very well," he said seriously. Emily was silent. She didn't quite understand what the doctor meant, but she didn't ask. 2 of the patients got worse. They had to be sent to the hospital. Isaac Alexander didn't seem nervous, but Emily could tell by the way his cheekbones moved. The city had gotten the first results. The prognosis was unfavorable, but just as I thought, lead and arsenic, he sighed. They dumped something right where the artesian pools were, brought the waste in and just poured it out of the barrels. Emily was shocked, but from the results, the water was the problem. The heavy metal levels were more than 20 times higher. The administration had already banned the use of the spring water for any purpose. Since few people kept livestock in the village, the deaths were not so widespread. The goats suffered the most. Isaac Alexander called the region time and time again, beating out the necessary drugs. The case reached New York. It was impossible to delay it, threatened the death of people. More doctors came to the village from other districts. The seriously ill began to be sent to places where there were opportunities for treatment and could be connected to the machines. The 3rd day was over. Emily and the doctor were going home. The relative they were staying with was feeling better, so there was hope for Isaac Alexander. "Is that your brother?" Emily asked him on the way home. "I'm very happy for him and for you." "No, he is my wife's brother," Isaac Alexander answered. "After her death, we sometimes communicate." Emily sank back into herself, remembering last night's dream. Her whole body was covered with goosebumps. Actually, they were supposed to arrive tomorrow morning, but Isaac Alexander decided to return at night. Emily didn't bother calling the household, carefully opened the wicket gate, then inserted the key as well, and the front door opened. The house was dark. Emily went in to see her son. He was asleep. She headed to her room, and William was gone. Her wife walked to the hall, but he was absent there as well. She walked toward the garage. William always drove the car in for the night, and to her amazement, the car wasn't there either. Emily felt dizzy and dialed William. He didn't answer. It was 2 on the clock. "God, where is he?" She sobbed. Her nerves had frayed over the last few days, and Emily couldn't keep her cool. She could barely sleep. She had to stay home tomorrow, and her shift started the day after. "Mom, hi." Andrew was surprised to see her early in the morning. "I thought I would see you only in the evening." "Son, where is father?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Did you see him last night?" "Yes. When I went to bed, he was at home," Andrew answered at once. "Yeah, he'd already left for work. Look at the time. Dad's got a big order now, so he's leaving early these days." "So you haven't seen him in the mornings?" Emily asked. "Andrew, answer me." No shrugged his son. Mom, what's going on? We weren't even expecting you until tonight. Dad said you'd go straight to work from your business trip. That was right. That was Emily's plan at first, but the other post nurse gave her until tomorrow morning to rest. Emily had forgotten to warn William about that. Something's not right here, she thought. When Andrew left for school, she wondered, where has he been sleeping all this time? It's no use asking him. I must find out for myself. William opened his eyes and stretched sweetly. Amber lay next to him. She was still asleep. The man got up and began to dress. This has to end, he muttered to himself. Our affair had gone on too long. Still, William couldn't help himself. He didn't know what he wanted. He didn't want to lose Emily, because she was a reliable person. With her, he could spend a peaceful old age, and if anything, she would look after him. On the other hand, he was bored. He stood and looked at himself in the mirror and saw great potential. Except with Emily, it wasn't being realized. He wanted passion, crazy emotions, in general, everything that usually happens with mistresses. William forgot about Tammy all too quickly. He no longer felt bad about it, and Emily wouldn't know about it. Well, he'd go out for a couple months. It's nothing. He'd still be with his wife, he thought. The most interesting thing was that only in the middle of the novel William learned that Amber works in the same hospital where his wife works. Moreover, they were, you could say, co-workers. This confused William at first. He immediately wanted to break up with Amber, but she was so into him that he realized not yet ready to leave her. That's how they met. According to the man, he was in the process of divorce because of a worthless wife. Naturally, he was unhappy. And since he was earning well and gave Amber good gifts, she had already made plans for him. She had to marry William, and at any cost. For a very conflicted Amber, who could not get along with anyone until 40 years old, it was the last chance. So the woman wasn't backing down. "Good morning, Kitty," heard the man behind him. "Are you awake already? Come here." She held out her arms to him. "Amber, I'll finish one thing and we'll have a serious talk," William smiled. "Yes, I hope it's about our future," her eyes lit up. "Billy, when are we going to be together?" "About our future," he answered. Except William was going to talk about ending the relationship, not continuing it. Amber pulled her lover toward her. She was happy. She had no doubt that everything would be her way now. Amber had wanted to quit her job for a long time. She was fed up with it already. William looked so much like the kind of man who could provide for Amber. She had been living the dream of him for the last few weeks. Amber was ready to write her resignation letter tomorrow, but she needed assurances. Until William put an engagement ring on her finger, there was a chance he'd run away from her. Amber's sharp tongue scared off even the most patient men who seemed to love her. All in all, the lovers made different plans for each other. William had cooled his passion, and Amber no longer stirred a storm of emotion in him. He quickly turned on his phone and turned pale. Emily had called him many times, and at night. "Okay, I need to get to work. The chief has already called several times." He quickly rushed out of the house. What's her problem? He thought as he got in his car and drove away from Amber's house. Around the corner, he stopped. "Emily, hi," he heard his wife's voice. "I'm sorry, I slept at the site. Didn't hear you call?" "Billy will talk to you later," she sounded angry. "I'm busy right now." William flinched. Something told him that Emily didn't believe his fables. Okay, later means later. He threw the phone down angrily and drove to work. Basically, they had already finished the renovations. They'd had a few days of downtime, and he'd spent all that time at Amber's place, coming over only in the evening so his son wouldn't suspect anything. "I should have broken up with her when she told him she was working at the hospital," the man said angrily to himself. "God forbid Emily finds out. She wouldn't forgive me this time. I don't need Amber for nothing, but I'm not leaving Emily. The man didn't even see himself contradicting himself. In his mind, it was normal to have an affair on the side and then kiss his wife as if nothing had happened. William thought that if he was living with Emily, it meant he loved her. There are no other options. He drove up to a friend's house with whom they worked together. There was nothing to do, and he didn't want to stay at Amber's place either. She'd already gotten everything she wanted the night before, and William was tired of her. But the mistress herself didn't think so. "Billy, can you get out for half an hour? I really need your help," she called to him. He went outside so his friend wouldn't hear him. "Yeah, I bought something here, something heavy. I need you to come over." The cab didn't want to take me. "All right, where are you?" "I got it. I'll be there in 15 minutes, he promised. Emily was very angry with her husband. She felt like this was all some kind of game. The evidence that William was hiding something was too obvious. His excuses didn't convince her. Emily couldn't find a place to be. She was very tired, but she couldn't sleep. She decided to go downtown to get some distraction, to go shopping. Emily got off the bus with no mood and headed towards the mall. She sat down on a bench. It was nice out, she sighed and looked around, and her gaze fell on the cars standing near the building. In the far corner, she saw some woman kissing her beau. Emily looked closely, but didn't see anything unusual. The lovers were too far away to see them in detail. But a car pulled away, and suddenly Emily saw that it was their passenger car. She had no doubt about it. Cab. She ran up to the car with the checkered license plate. "Please follow that blue Lada, just so they don't see us." "We're in pursuit," laughed the cabbie. "I hope there won't be a shootout." "No," Emily said angrily. "I don't have a gun. I don't carry them in public." The man froze in his seat. He didn't really like the passenger's joke, and they drove for about 20 minutes. William turned down a street. The cabbie followed him. The car stopped and Amber got out. The cab drove past. Emily tried to hide so she wouldn't be seen and saw her husband pulling something heavy out. It was a struggle for the woman to get home. She was torn by unbearable pain. She was alone, screaming for relief. At first she wanted to call her husband and tell him everything, but then she pulled herself together and wrote a message to her son that she would go to work today. She arrived at the hospital that night, asked her shift worker to go home. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Her lips quivered. "I'm fine. I thought I'd let Lily rest. I'll be on duty tonight. Can't you, Alexander?" Looked at her pale face, answered nothing, went to his room. Emily didn't know he was sleeping at the hospital tonight, too. He'd gotten a good night's sleep during the day. While they were gone, a patient had been brought in who urgently needed help. He had to be under constant observation for at least a couple days. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. Emily sat in the nurse's room, crying. She didn't want to live, even though all of this was obvious. Emily didn't think she couldn't live through it this time. "I'm sorry, Andrew," she whispered. "Son, but I can't go on like this." She moved the jar of medication toward her. She didn't have the strength to fight anymore. She gave up, brought a mug of water to her lips, trembling, poured the pills on the table. Everyone slept so she would be found dead in the morning. Emily was so absorbed in her pain that she didn't even hear the footsteps. She put the palm of her hand to her mouth with the pills. "What are you doing?" Isaac Alexander rushed to her, grabbed the nurse's hand, and all the pills flew to the floor. "Emily, what's going on?" He squeezed her palm so tightly that she even shrieked. The woman stared at him blankly. The doctor opened the faucet, drew water, poured it over her head with lightning speed. "What are you doing?" I'm wet." She came to her senses. She waved her hands away from the doctor. Isaac Alexander still managed to wipe her hair with a towel. He pulled the woman against him. Emily hugged him and sobbed loudly. "It's all right," he said in a gentle voice. "Emily, you're going to feel better now." He grabbed the nurse and dragged her into his office. He quickly took out some pills and threw them into a glass of water. Emily managed to drink them down. She was trembling. Isaac Alexander kept stroking her head. She began to calm down. "Thank you," she whispered. "Oh my God, I almost poisoned myself." She didn't even have the strength to cry. Isaac Alexander put her on the couch and stayed with her until she fell asleep. "Stupid girl," he scolded as he returned to his office. "No problem is worth taking your own life." Around 6, Emily opened her eyes and immediately remembered what had happened. She felt both ashamed and hurt that she could have died. She opened the door. Isaac Alexander was asleep. She gazed into his face. It was filled with light. "I guess there are angels on earth after all," she thought. That's how kindness and a desire to help people hide behind coldness and calculating. Isaac Alexander seemed so dear to her. Emily sat quietly in her chair and watched him. She didn't know how much time had passed, but at one point the doctor opened his eyes. "How long?" he asked immediately. "Emily, are you okay?" "Yes, thanks to you, I didn't make a fatal mistake. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here." She lowered her eyes. "Can you tell me what happened?" The doctor sat down on the couch. "Judging by what you wanted to do, something serious." "My husband cheated on me." And not for the first time, tears flowed down her cheeks. "When we were still living at home, he had an affair with our neighbor." And now Emily was silent. "And now my husband is having an affair with Amber, remember? She told me at her birthday party that she'd met a prince. Well, it was him. I saw them together. Yeah, it's Santa Barbara." Isaac Alexander scratched his head. "But if he's such an unreliable man, then he's hardly worth you taking your life because of him." "I certainly won't now. It was some kind of obsession. I don't know how to explain it to you. I was in so much pain," she whispered. "I understand. I was in the same situation myself once. After my wife died, I didn't want to live either. I tried slitting my wrists once, but I couldn't. And the second time I wanted to hang myself. But all the time someone held me back. I trusted this force, and now I am grateful to God that he did not allow my death. You have to live, no matter how difficult it is. It's the only way to understand why we've been given all this." Emily calmed down. She realized clearly that she would not stay with William, no matter how much their son suffered. She could never forgive her husband again. By 8, Amber came in, radiant. Emily was as cold to her as ever. "Were you tortured last night?" She was outraged. "Why are you looking at me like I'm the enemy?" Emily went to change. A doctor approached the post nurse. Isaac Alexander asked her to come in to see him. "You wanted to see me?" Amber tossed the doctor nonchalantly. "I see Semyonov hasn't gotten any better." "Yes, but this isn't about him," the doctor replied calmly. "Amber, I'd like us to have a private conversation." The nurse jumped. The first thing that came to her mind was that Isaac Alexander would be imposing on her as a fiancé. "Amber, a bad situation has come up," he began, "and I don't even know how to tell you about it." "What is it?" the woman exclaimed impatiently. "If you want to ask me out, I'm sorry, I'm busy." "That's exactly what this is about. Amber, are you going to marry someone else's husband?" Isaac Alexander's cheekbones flared. I don't know how this mistake happened, but your fiancé is Emily's husband. She saw you outside the mall yesterday. She followed you in a cab to your house. Her husband gave you a ride, Isaac Alexander pointed out. What a load of crap. Amber jumped out of his office and started calling her lover. Billy, answer quickly. Your wife, Emily. William disconnected immediately. Amber tried calling him many more times, but he blocked her number. Emily had already gone home, so she couldn't talk to her in person. William realized he was busted, angry at himself, but he had to get out of it somehow. The best option was to disappear out of sight for a few days for now to figure something out. Amber dialed up her rival. She was insanely angry, except the woman didn't realize that Emily had nothing to do with it at all. You stupid fool. She yelled into the phone. Why are you slandering me? Are you trying to make me look bad? You're having an affair with Billy and you want to get rid of witnesses. Amber, what are you talking about? Emily tried to talk to her calmly. Are you the one going out with my husband? I didn't interfere with your family. You're lying. Amber screamed. Are you sleeping with that asshole? I saw you. So you're cheating on your husband? The bitch loves my Billy. The woman didn't want to admit she'd been caught. It wasn't even that William had inherently lied to her. Amber didn't want to admit she'd gotten herself into such a messy mess. She just couldn't. Her reputation wouldn't let her. Amber was ready to tear everyone apart. William still hadn't returned her calls. The woman had worked her shift, but she wasn't going to let it go. Well, I'll show you, she threatened Emily. The bitch couldn't hold on to a man, and now she's blaming me. Amber had already realized that William was really her husband. But instead of being angry at him, she focused all her hatred on Emily. I'll show you. You'll be kicked out of the hospital, she threatened. You idiot. She got a man like that. Emily couldn't reach William either. Her son came home that evening, so she decided to talk to Andrew. Son, she sighed, you're a big boy and you understand something about life. Looked at him, mother. It happens that adults can go their separate ways. Did you and your father have a fight? The boy guessed. I won't get involved. If Dad leaves us, I won't feel guilty anymore, he reassured her. Thank you, Emily hugged him. Andrew, I love you so much. She already wanted to fly out of this cage to freedom, and she finally calmed down. She no longer saw any obstacle to staying with her husband. She had endured almost a year for her son's sake, but William had not changed, and Emily had no idea what problems lay ahead. Emily entered the hospital. She hated to cross paths with Amber, but Amber was waiting for her. Remember, she whirled her hands in front of her face. I'm not to be trifled with. Is it your fault that Billy cheated on you? I know what was really going on between you two. He told me everything. The other guy would have kicked you out of the house a long time ago. She was yelling really loud on purpose. What did he tell you? Emily asked with her arms crossed over her chest. Did he catch me with a man? That too, Amber said angrily. I can see why you got your hands on that robot. Billy told me how you were having an affair with the guy in charge at your house. He wouldn't leave you for your son. The whole hospital was buzzing about Emily sleeping with Isaac Alexander. Naturally, Amber did it deliberately to cover her dirty deeds. Now, there were few people who believed Emily's words, even if she did say that Amber had been out with William. Emily knocked on the door to the doctor's office, walked in and couldn't stand it, covered her face with her hand and sobbed. Emily, what happened? He came up to her. Did your husband hurt you? No. Amber told everyone that you and I were lovers. Can you believe it? She sobbed. What the hell is that? He swore. She's confused about her connections. She can't see what's true and what isn't. And the worst thing is that everyone believes her. Emily looked at him with eyes full of tears. Idiot. She asked for it. He left the office abruptly. I'll cut her down. After lunch, the head doctor summoned Amber to his office. Isaac Alexander and Emily were already in the office. Amber Stevens, the chief, addressed her. On what grounds did you decide that your co-workers were engaging in lewd behavior at work? Did you see it with your own eyes? Amber really wanted to lie, but she felt the consequences would not be pleasant. No, she said quietly, her eyes downcast and silent. The head doctor gave her a hard look. Unfortunately, he did something she had not expected. He paused. You are fired, he said loudly. Bring a statement, and I'll sign it. Take it easy, the head doctor said. Amber, like you are a pond, and real specialists like Isaac Alexander can be counted on the fingers. If you had a brain, you wouldn't be making all this up. Amber walked out of the head doctor's office in crocodile tears, and her career was over. Her job didn't seem so bad now. Amber had gotten a small house from her first husband, so basically she'd settled into life pretty well. Now she had no money and no job. Emily thanked the doctor for his support and got to work. She decided not to wait any longer. Tomorrow morning she would try to find her husband. Isaac Alexander, let me use your phone to make a call, Emily asked the doctor before leaving. My husband doesn't take my calls. The doctor handed her the phone and left the office. Emily had a feeling William would answer it for her, since the call could have been from a potential client. Hello, the wife spoke quickly. I'm filing for divorce. There can be no talking. Your half of the house I'll buy out. Okay, I'll be there, William angrily replied and disconnected the phone. Emily drove home with only one question: where would she get the money for the house? Perhaps there was something her parents could do to help her. Maybe he would agree to match the alimony? The thought crossed her mind, though I'd even agree without them, just so he'd be out of my life. Before Emily could enter the house, William appeared on the doorstep. Andrew was already at school. Please don't be silly, Emily said immediately. Billy, we're adults. Everything has to be paid for. If you didn't understand anything after the first time, you'll never understand again. William didn't really engage in dialogue. He agreed to give up his share of the alimony. Basically, he was making good money. He packed some things and left. Emily was overjoyed. As she found out later, he'd moved in with Amber. The latter walked around with her head held high and said that she was right all along, but as soon as she got what she wanted, she started acting like she always had. That's why William never even got married. 6 months later, he packed up his things and left in an unknown direction. Amber had no choice but to badmouth him now. It wasn't like she could make a fool of herself. It was always someone else's fault in Amber's life. The relationship between Emily and Isaac Alexander, on the other hand, had become friendlier and warmer. Emily, come see me, the doctor called her one day. It's an emergency, he asked. Emily rushed over. The doctor was standing by the window, as he always did. He had a cup of coffee in his hands. It's my birthday today, he smiled. Would you like to keep me company? It's been so long since I've celebrated it. Do you want to take Andrew with you? And go where her eyes lit up. Isaac Alexander. I suggest someplace quiet. Andrew chatted with his father. To his mother's surprise, he'd gotten through the divorce easily. He was already going on 13. Young one, sit by yourself, the son replied to her invitation. You, on the other hand, Isaac Alexander will bring you. You won't be bored alone at home. She hugged him. Andrew, you're all grown up now, so I understand you two needing to babysit, he laughed. Ma, I like him. Nice uncle, nobody called him uncle for sure, laughed his mother. Okay, rest up. She ruffled her son's hair. That night was a new phase in the lives of both Emily and Isaac Alexander. 3 months later, they were married. And now Emily was taking care of him, keeping him from working so much. Of course, it was hard for Isaac Alexander to relax after so many years of hard work. But in their lives, there was another circumstance. Emily, almost 40, gave birth to his daughter. Isaac Alexander reduced the load at work to spend more time with his wife and children. They sold Emily's house and the doctor's parents' house, which was empty for many years. So they were able to travel a little and pamper the children. And they tried not to hurt themselves. Isaac Alexander was well paid for consultations in fee-based clinics. And Emily, as soon as her daughter grew up, returned to her home hospital. How could you think of an old woman having a baby? Ashley, a blonde girl of 13, stood on the porch of the school and watched as her friend Emily, who was in the same class as her, talked to her older brother. Ashley dreamed now of being in her classmate's shoes and having a conversation with the guy. The girl had fallen in love with her friend's brother Jason last year, and she didn't even realize how it happened. Ashley just woke up one day with thoughts of this teenager, and after that she thought about the guy all the time. As soon as the girl realized that she had fallen in love, she started giving signs of attention to the high schooler. She planted unsigned love notes, but soon she, as a secret admirer, was exposed, and ridicule from Jason's buddy followed. Ashley felt strongly about it at the time. However, her mother Mary, who knew about her daughter's crush, told her to keep her mind off the guy. You're still young, and it's far away. You're not in love, just a crush. As time passes, you'll laugh at your own crush. But a year had passed, and Ashley was still in love with Jason. And now she was standing there watching Emily's friend talking to her brother. Ashley, watching the conversation between the two, dreamed about how her lover would come to her and confess his feelings to her. The girl noticed her friend and her brother heading towards her. Ashley felt a slight shiver go down her spine. She tried to pull herself together. In the meantime, the pair approached her, and Jason said with a good-natured smile, "Hey you need to grow up a little." And then, looking back at the older kids, maybe you're expecting those words from me. But my sister has already told me that you are withering from unrequited love. Ashley, hearing those words, shuddered involuntarily, as if from a blow. The girl looked at her friend reproachfully, and then she turned and ran away. At the moment, she didn't care that she was acting like a cranky little girl. Ashley was annoyed by her lover's words. She was also hurt that her friend was secretly talking to her brother about her. Ashley ran and heard Emily asking her to stop and talk. However, the girl was not responding to her mate's cries. Ashley wanted to run home now, lock herself in her room, and let the tears flow, which soon happened. When the girl calmed down, she made a vow to herself that she would not talk to her friend again, and she also promised herself that she would tear her love for Jason out of her heart and would not look in his direction again. And when Mary's mother came home from work, Ashley pronounced to her, "I don't hang out with Emily anymore. So if she comes over, just tell her I'm not here." What'd you get? It's no big deal. You'll make up in a couple days. By the way, what was the fight about? What was it about? It's a long conversation. Emily's a traitor. That's a pretty big thing to say. You can't make such serious accusations against a man, especially since Emily is your friend. Why don't you tell me what happened? Mary said affectionately and sat down next to her daughter. Ashley looked at her mother carefully, then excitedly told her what had happened. The woman listened to her daughter, and then she patted her head and said softly, "Your friend cares about you. She wanted to do you a good favor. Emily thought that talking to her brother about you might help draw the boy's attention to you. But what her friend didn't realize was that you can't command the heart. If Jason doesn't care about you, there's nothing you can do about it." Mary paused for a moment. Then, with a sad sigh, she said. "You surprised me, daughter. I thought you weren't thinking about Jason anymore. You're getting a little secretive. Or is it my own fault that I don't notice anything but work?" "Mom, don't say that," Ashley said. "I'm not hiding anything from you, I just don't want to worry you. You really work so hard that I don't want you to worry about me. Taking care of you is the best part for me. You're the only one I've got. And you have to work hard for one simple reason: you need money. Your grandparents on my side of the family are long gone. Your father divorced me 2 years ago and forgot about the obligation to pay child support. And your grandparents on your daddy's side don't need you. Why not? You see, daughter, in some families it happens that parents have 2 children and one child becomes the favorite. That's what happened in your daddy's family. He didn't become a favorite from mom and dad, and as a result they don't need you as a granddaughter. If before the divorce with your father they still congratulated you on your birthday, now it does not happen. And you know it yourself. Mom, you always told me that you and Dad got divorced because that's how life works. How does it happen?" her daughter asked her mother in a low voice. Ashley had longed to know the answer, but there had never been the right occasion for such a conversation. Mary sighed softly, put her arm around her and said, "You're getting older and older every day, and I don't even notice it. Well, I'll answer your question. Your father fell in love with another woman who gave him a child, the son he dreamed of. So he made a choice, but not in our direction. Just don't blame him or judge him. Life is complicated. You'll realize that later." After talking to her mom, Ashley felt a lot better. She even took her mind off the fact that she was upset with her friend. The girl kept thinking about the relationship between her parents, and also pondered how she would act in her mother's situation. And in the evening, when Emily called to apologize, Ashley interrupted her and said that she was no longer offended. But she added, "Now it's nothing personal. I won't trust you, or you'll tell the whole world." Time moved on, and now Ashley was 16. The New Year's Eve ball was coming up. The girl carefully thought over her closet for these holidays. She hoped that her friend's brother would come to the ball. Ashley told Emily that she had invited Jason to the event, and Ashley, against all odds, secretly continued to love Jason all this time. And now the girl is already in the auditorium where the New Year's Eve ball has begun. She looks around, hoping to see her lover. Ashley nervously corrects the gatherings on her cornflower-colored dress. The girl had seen this outfit in the store a long time ago, and her mother went to meet her needs and bought it without paying for utilities. Ashley knew about all this, and when the purchase was made, she was nervous because she knew how sensitive they were to late payments. But she wasn't thinking about that now. She wanted to see Jason and to win him over with her appearance. For some reason, she was sure that would happen. Ashley was not fooled in her expectations. Slow music started playing and the DJ announced a white dance. A classmate approached the girl to ask her to dance. Ashley smilingly wanted to point out that the ladies were now choosing the suitors while agreeing. As she suddenly noticed Jason, who had just walked into the auditorium with a buddy. Ashley smiled at her classmate and bluntly refused the offer to dance. The girl fixed her blonde curls, headed toward Jason, walked up to the young man, smiled radiantly, and spoke amiably. "Perhaps tonight your highness will indulge us in a dance at the New Year's Eve ball." Jason looked at the girl, although he saw her at school every day, but on weekdays she seemed to him to be an ordinary schoolgirl who was not different from her peers. Basically, the guy just didn't pay attention to Ashley. But at that moment, she stood in front of him, as if she were a chic woman who had stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. Jason looked at Ashley and couldn't understand how in one day she could transform herself so much. He couldn't help but voice his thoughts aloud. "You're like a fairy tale, from an ugly duckling to a beautiful swan. I can't believe I'm standing in front of Ashley, the same Ashley who's been bugging me for years with her crushes. Are you going to grumble or dance with me when the music stops?" he said with a smile. Ashley didn't say anything else, but simply stepped toward Jason. Soon the couple was dancing. Ashley couldn't believe that she was being embraced by the man she'd dreamed of for so many years, that he would notice her in some way. And Jason continued to marvel at how much his sister's friend had changed. The dance ended. Ashley hurried over to Emily. Jason tried to hold her back, but she just smiled back and headed toward her friend. Emily winked at her friend, but she waved back and sat down on a bench. The music in the room was energetic. Ashley watched the dancers and occasionally glanced at Jason, who was also watching her. At one point she looked at the guy again, but he was gone. She looked around confused as she suddenly heard the DJ's announcement. This beautiful tune one man dedicates to a beautiful girl named Ashley and asks her to dance. Before Ashley realized what was being said, Jason appeared in front of her and held out his hand. Jason offered to dance again, and soon the couple was dancing to a beautiful melody. They danced together more than once that night, and when the New Year's Eve ball was over, Jason volunteered to walk them home. The couple walked down the snowy road, holding hands. At first they were silent, unable to find the right words. But when they reached the girl's house, Jason suddenly turned Ashley toward him and said quietly, "Will you be my girlfriend?" Ashley laughed, then showed her boyfriend her tongue and hurried toward the house. Jason frowned. "I don't see what's so funny. I'm serious." After he said that, the girl stopped and then walked leisurely back toward Jason. Once next to him, she looked into his eyes and whispered, "Do you know how much I want to tell you right now? How long have I waited for you to notice me? I've endured your friends' taunts, your condescending attitude toward me, as if I were a juvenile who couldn't be taken seriously. And now you're just offering to be your girlfriend. How do I know tomorrow it won't be another joke to amuse my friends?" "Ashley, what are you talking about?" "Yeah, there was a time when I made fun of you, but this is serious. I really want you to be my girlfriend, and I promise that no one will hurt you now." Ashley smiled, waved, and headed home. Jason didn't stop her. Once inside, the girl was greeted by Mary's mother, who saw who was seeing her daughter off. Mary asked how the ball had gone, but all she heard in response was, "Fine." The woman came over and hugged her daughter gently, but Ashley suddenly snuggled into her shoulder and cried. Mary held her tighter against her, and when she calmed down a little, she said softly, "Jason's been paying attention to you. And you don't believe him? Or is there another reason you're crying?" For you, Jason was like conquering a summit. Ashley was going for it. And this is the finale. What's he got going for him? Mammoth, what are you saying? I really love Jason. What finale? Ashley shouted indignantly and broke free from her mother's embrace. It was at that moment that the mother realized that her daughter had actually fallen in love with the guy. The woman only softly mouthed in response, "That's how you know what the feeling is. Look, just don't lose your head." The next day, Jason met Ashley after school and then walked her home. And from that day on, the two began to see each other differently. They tried to meet at every spare moment to be together. A month later, Jason confessed his love for the girl. Time passed, and Jason graduated from high school, after which he was soon drafted into the army. Ashley knew perfectly well that the lover initially wants to serve, wait until he turns 18, and after that to sign. The girl was not against the decision of the chosen one. Especially the decision of the guy pleased Jason's parents and Ashley's mother, who wanted the young people not to hurry with a trip to the registry office. Jason served and returned home. He enrolled in college and Ashley was in the 11th grade. Young people continued to meet and dream that soon they would become a married couple, which soon happened. As soon as the girl graduated from high school and she turned 18, the couple legalized the relationship. Ashley enrolled in college at the commodity manager. The newlyweds moved in with Mary. The woman insisted on it. life itself slowly flowed further. Initially graduated from the school Jason, who got a job immediately on specialty. Afterward, Ashley received a specialty. She, too, got a job. Now the young woman dreamed that they had a child. But several years passed, and she could not get pregnant. Ashley became anxious about it. She was examined, as well as her husband, and soon Ashley received the verdict that she and her husband had different Rh factors, and it would be difficult to conceive a child. The doctor also added, in your case, getting pregnant under this circumstance will not be easy. I can add that the probability of conceiving a baby is equated to 20% out of 100. However, you can do IVF. That is my advice to you. Ashley was dumbfounded by the doctor's news, but she didn't lose hope and offered her husband to do the required procedure. The young woman piously believed that her spouse would agree to it. But Jason took the proposal of his wife in the bayonet. The man responded by saying everything should be like a normal married couple, without the intervention of any newfangled procedures. Ashley had a hard time with her spouse's answer, but she didn't want to contradict it. She still hoped that the doctors might have made a mistake. The young woman had even enrolled in medical school by correspondence. Ashley now wanted to become a midwife to figure out for herself why she could not get pregnant from her loved one. However, due to the fact that the lady could not conceive a child, scandals began to occur in the family. Jason, if initially veiledly accused his wife that she could not have children, then soon began to openly accuse the chosen one that she was empty. All the excuses of Ashley, who said that she could not get pregnant not only because of her fault, were reduced to zero. Jason blamed only his wife. Soon the man began to stay late at work. Ashley was worried, nervous. She did not want to lose her favorite person. However, family life imperceptibly shipwrecked, and one day Jason came home and began to pack his things. Ashley watched her husband in silence at first, and then she mumbled, "What are you doing? Can't you see? I'm leaving you. I have a woman. I'm sorry, she's expecting a baby. You have to realize we're not right for each other. It happens. I'm sorry. But we've only been together 4 years. Other couples have been together for decades and they don't have kids. And then a baby is born. Maybe you're right. But there's one thing. There's another woman expecting a baby from me, and she doesn't have to wait 10 years to get pregnant. Ashley and Jason should get a divorce, as each of them would be better off with a separate life. I'm sorry, but I have to explain to you the simple truth when you yourself understand everything perfectly well," the woman replied quietly, realizing that it was pointless to hold her husband back. He had made up his mind. Ashley looked sadly at her spouse after these words and left the house. She didn't want to see the man she loved packing his things to leave for good, which soon happened. A month passed after Jason left his wife. During that time, he came to Ashley's house only once to pick up the rest of his belongings and to tell her that he had filed for divorce. Ashley took it calmly, realizing that nothing could be changed. She only wished her ex-husband a happy farewell. Time passed. 3 years passed after the divorce. During this time, Ashley graduated from medical school, got a job in a hospital. Personal life of a young woman did not add up, although representatives of the stronger sex tried to look after her. However, Ashley was indifferent to the attention of men. Her mother was worried about this and repeatedly said, "Daughter, you can't do this. You do not think about your personal life. So many years have passed after the divorce, and you do not even want to accept the courtship of a decent man. I'm talking about Max, who lives across the street. He's been trying to get your attention for months. And you're not paying attention, Mom. You're not paying attention. Can we not start your favorite topic about my personal life?" Ashley said irritably and looked at her mother reproachfully. Mary shook her head sadly in response. A little over a month after her conversation with her mother, Ashley was coming home after work. She wondered if she really should accept her neighbor's advances. The woman went over the merits of her bow in her mind. Ashley was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't immediately hear the question. She looked at the brunette and said softly, "Yes, did you say something?" "I asked you where Takaya Street 63 was. You're going the wrong way. You need to turn left, and then a few houses later another left." After that, Ashley was interrupted by a laughing stranger. "I've never been sent this far in my life. Why don't you have some time and draw me a route on a piece of paper?" "I'd rather walk you than draw it," Ashley said with a smile. "Can I really expect such a beautiful woman to be my guide? This is my lucky day, and I have good luck in all things," exclaimed the stranger cheerfully. Ashley didn't answer, turned the other way and walked away. The man followed her, telling her why he was in this town. From the story of the new acquaintance, who introduced himself as Alex, Ashley learned that he came here for construction, rented a place on an ad, and earned a little money. Ashley also learned that Alex was married when he was 30 years old, but the family life did not work out, and he and his wife separated by mutual consent. Hearing about the divorce, Ashley involuntarily remembered the breakup with her ex-husband. She thought that she had no relationship left with Jason after the divorce. The ex-spouse had simply packed up and disappeared from her life. The woman only heard news about him from his sister. Thinking about it, Ashley smiled sadly, which didn't escape her new acquaintance. "Why are you sad?" "I guess I'm not a good conversationalist," he said. "It's all right. We're almost there. Now you need to turn into the alley, and there you will find the right house. We are happy to help you. Let's say goodbye." "Wait, I'm not ready to let you go right away," Jason said. "Why don't you let me meet you? Or is there another way? I'll have fun now, and then you can take me to a better cafe where we can continue talking. I have to work today and I'm a little tired." "Yes, and you from the road need a break." "Whatever you say," Ashley said. "Let me give you my phone number and we'll call tomorrow and you can tell me where to go. One more thing. Why don't we go back to being on a first-name basis?" "Okay," she replied politely, then dictated her phone number and waved her hand to her new acquaintance. She turned around and hurried home. When Ashley got home, her mother came to her and anxiously asked why she was late after work. The woman hugged her mother affectionately and told her about the encounter. "Honey, what's wrong with you?" Mary exclaimed fearfully. "Were you sensible when you went with a stranger alone to see him off? What if this man was a criminal, and it was a planned operation to rob you, or even worse?" "Mom, don't panic," Ashley stopped her. "We live in the 21st century. First of all, I'm not beautiful enough to make a man want me at first sight. Second, I don't look like I have a lot of money. You can see it in my clothes. I don't wear brand name clothes. And third, Jason doesn't look like a gangster. I hope you're convinced by my arguments." Still, it was reckless. Mary sighed. "Promise me you won't do it again." "I will, Mommy," she said with a smile and hugged her mother. A few days later, Ashley met with Jason. The couple chose a small, cozy cafe to talk. The young people made an order, and then Jason asked her how things were going on the personal front. She laughed contagiously when she heard the question, and Jason was puzzled by it. "Your question about my personal life was inappropriate for the situation," Ashley explained. "If I had a boyfriend or was married, would I be sitting with you right now? Of course not. Let's just say that I was married at one time. But it didn't work out for the same reasons you are. We drifted apart. So I'm waiting for my prince to appear on the horizon. Could that be you?" "I don't know. It's too early to tell," Jason said. "It's only the second time we've seen each other. And we don't know each other. I want to tell you right away that I'm not going to get you into bed right now. Sex isn't the most important thing to me when I'm with a woman. although I don't deny that it's important too. That's honesty, Ashley said thoughtfully and turned the conversation to another direction. After that date, the couple began to call and see each other frequently. 2 months after meeting Jason, Ashley introduced him to her mother. Mary was charmed by her daughter's gallant suitor and informed Ashley about it. "I like Jason myself. I think I'm in love." "That's wonderful." Her daughter smiled. "Has he proposed yet?" "No, he just said that I was his one and only. But you know that men are ready for beautiful words just to get into bed. I'm more interested in actions, not sweet talk." "Then I'll talk to him about it," Mary decided. "But don't do that. I'm going to be 30 in a couple years. Do you want to organize my personal life for me?" Mary smiled at her daughter's words. She didn't say anything in response. However, the older woman took it upon herself to talk to Jason about it. When Jason came to visit again, the landlady offered to have a private conversation with her under a plausible pretext. Jason was surprised by Mary's request. Soon the older woman and the man were sitting in the kitchen while Ashley ran to the store at that moment. Mary had specifically asked her daughter to go get the hammer so she could be alone with Jason. And as soon as Ashley closed the door behind her, the lady of the house asked, "Man, are you going to live your life as a guest? I mean, do you intend to marry your daughter? Are you just going to take me on like that?" Jason replied, bewildered, not expecting a conversation on the subject. In the meantime, Mary asked tricky questions that were directed in one direction only when Jason would propose. Jason's answers were slurred. Then he rose abruptly from his chair and said firmly, "I love your daughter, but can she and I decide when we should marry? I respect you, but I just didn't want to be told what to do and when to do it." "Jason, I'm not interfering with your relationship. It's just that you're not seeing the basics. You don't see Ashley changing from the unknown. I get the impression that your daughter is beginning to doubt your feelings for her." "Are you serious?" Jason asked, puzzled. "I couldn't be more serious. You talk to her about marriage, and then you'll understand," she said with a sad smile. A few days passed after that conversation. Mary was glowing in the kitchen. She knew that today her daughter should come with her boyfriend after work. The older woman cooked pilaf that day and pondered how much longer it would take Jason to propose. The landlady had set a table in the hall. She didn't like to huddle in the kitchen when guests came over. At the moment, Jason was still a guest to her, since he was not a groom. Mary put the plates on the table as she heard the front door open. The woman hurried into the hallway, where she saw her daughter entering with Jason. The man politely greeted the lady of the house and then handed a bouquet of scarlet roses with the words, "I have proposed to Ashley and she has agreed to be my other half. Now it's up to you. We want to hear you say your blessing." "Who else among us is taking the bait?" said the old woman with a grin in response. She winked conspiratorially at the man, which embarrassed him, for he remembered that he had recently addressed that word to the lady of the house. Meanwhile, Mary smiled cordially and said, "Of course I bless you. You young people have pleased me today. I hope that soon I will hear the guests shouting bitter. You won't hear that, because we will quietly sign without any celebration. We're not 18 years old enough to have a big party," Ashley said quietly, glancing at the groom as if to suggest that he agree with her. Jason did. Soon the marriage took place. Jason came to live with his wife. Ashley was happy that she had found her happiness as a woman because she truly loved Jason. Her husband reciprocated. Mary, looking at the newlyweds, only wished them long happiness and health. Imperceptibly after the wedding, 2 years flew by. The couple occasionally had a few misunderstandings between them, but it concerned all everyday things, something Ashley didn't have time to do around the house or Jason. And at such times the couple expressed their discontent with each other. But such spats were settled the same day, and the couple went to bed reconciled. Ashley was satisfied with everything in her life except one thing: she couldn't get pregnant. Every day she called herself an outcast more and more often. One day, coming home after her shift, she walked into her bedroom, threw herself on the bed, and burst into bitter tears. Her mother came to the crying and sat down next to her daughter. The elderly woman guessed the cause of her tears. She stroked her daughter's head affectionately and said quietly, "Why are you getting upset? Don't cry, my girl. Apparently it's not yet your time to be a mom." "What are you talking about? What time is it?" "I'm already 30. Soon I won't even know what pregnancy is. I know labor is when a baby is born. But what if my husband comes a year from now and tells me he has a woman expecting a child with him? I've been there before. What do you say to that, Mom?" "First of all, calm down. Don't think about your ex-husband. He probably didn't love you enough to look outside of you. And as for Jason, he's not that kind of man. Jason loves you. I can see the way he looks at you and would do anything to make you happy with him. If he's willing to do anything, why not get checked out by the doctors? I've told him that more than once, and Jason just looks at me with sadness," Ashley tearfully told her mother. "He looks that way because it's impossible to talk to you about this topic. Jason actually wants to get a checkup. There's nothing wrong with his health. But he's not talking about it for one reason only. Jason's worried that you're stressing yourself out about not being pregnant. That's your reason. Think about it. Why is your husband keeping quiet about the checkup?" Ashley stopped crying after her mother's words and thought for a moment. She was silent for a while, thinking about what she had heard, and then she turned to her mother, suddenly buried her face in her chest, and said quietly, "You can't imagine how bitter I feel now. I thought I was suffering alone. But it turns out that you are also worried about me. And also, Mom, it's getting harder for me to go to work every day. Let's take today's case, for example. We had a young girl admitted a few days ago. She just turned 18. She gave birth to a boy today. And now she's giving up her son because her boyfriend doesn't want children. You know how jealous I am. You can't even imagine. She's lucky enough to be a mom, even in a situation where her boyfriend doesn't want kids. I'd have a baby if I were her. I'd give the guy my resignation." That's what I told her today. But she told me to stay out of her personal life. "Daughter, don't try that girl's situation on yourself. You have your life, she has hers. Now try to just calm down, or Jason will come over and worry about you." "Okay, thanks for the support." "I needed it," her daughter said quietly. Life slowly moved on. It had been 3 years since Ashley's wedding. The woman no longer hoped that she would ever become a mother, but she still had that hope in her heart. However, Ashley did not say it out loud. On the contrary, she told her husband more and more often that their family was incomplete. These statements only caused Jason more heartache, for he knew how much she dreamed of having children. When the conversation about the family being incomplete, Jason couldn't stand it and angrily asked his wife to shut up. Ashley, hearing her husband's tone, was frightened, because in such a way her husband had never allowed her to talk to him like that. When Ashley's first shock passed, the woman said, "All this is because I can't give you an heir. Stop it, please. That's not what I'm tired of. It's that you're making an issue out of the wrong place. I understand that you dream of having a child, as every woman does. But why do you keep talking about it? We've only been living for 3 years, which means we have to wait a while longer." Before the husband could finish his sentence, he was angrily interrupted by his wife. "Shut up. My first husband said the same thing to me." And what happened in the end? He found a woman who bore him a son. He didn't cheat while he was still married, all because I couldn't get pregnant. And that was the only reason I went to medical school, to become a midwife back in the day, to find out the real reason why I couldn't have children. Wait, but you told me that your divorce was because, as they say, you didn't get along. I lied. And now you know the truth and you can roll. "I'm not holding you," Ashley yelled hysterically. She was about to throw their family picture at her husband as her mother Mary entered the room. Mary gave her daughter a stern look and then quietly asked Jason to leave. The man didn't object and complied with his mother-in-law's request. Once the older woman was alone with her daughter, she sat up to Ashley and spoke softly. "Aren't you ashamed of throwing a tantrum here? I understand that you're nervous, but what does this have to do with your husband? You're torturing yourself and him. Do you want that? Enjoy your life. You love each other, and you'll still have a daughter, take my word for it." "But when, Mom?" "I said she will, so she will. We just have to be patient." I've heard those words many times before. How long do I have to wait? The gynecologist told me that everything is fine with my husband's health too. But I'm still not getting pregnant. After saying that, Ashley abruptly got up from the couch and ran out of the room. Immediately she ran into her husband Jason, who was looking at her with a sad look. The woman walked briskly toward the exit. Jason wanted to follow, but his mother-in-law stopped him, saying, "Don't follow Ashley. Let her get some fresh air. Let her calm down. And in a motherly way, I suggest you go to church with your wife and pray. Ashley's already been there. I suggest you both go. Trust me, Jason, it won't cost you anything." "Okay, Mary," Jason replied. Some time passed. Ashley was at work in a pensive mood. The woman's thoughts were preoccupied with the fact that her menstrual cycle had gone astray. Ashley's pensive mood was noticed by the doctor on duty and asked what was going on with her. Ashley was embarrassed by the question but still told what was bothering her. The medical officer laughed upon hearing the answer and said reproachfully, "I marvel at you, woman. Take you at least, Ashley. Where do you work?" "In a maternity hospital. A midwife." "Exactly. When symptoms like these arise, where should a woman go? And given that you're also a medical professional, what are your thoughts?" "Okay. You don't have to answer that. I can see by the look on your face that the answers to the questions have occurred to you. Let's go. I'd better check you out." After a while, Ashley came out in a happy mood. The doctor informed her that she was pregnant. Upon learning the wonderful news, Ashley immediately called her spouse and then her mother. Soon she was registered at the antenatal clinic. The woman spent the first trimester in the hospital. Then the pregnancy developed without complications. And soon Ashley gave birth to a baby girl at term. The newly married parents named their daughter Amber. The couple was in the seventh heaven of happiness that they had a child. Rejoiced at this event and Ashley's mother. The woman immediately noticed that after the birth of her daughter, as if blossomed. This was noticed not only by Mary but also by neighbors, who at every opportunity said to the elderly woman how Ashley has become more beautiful after the birth of her daughter. She's glowing from the inside out with happiness. "We're so happy for you." "Thank you," Mary replied, and immediately recited the Lord's Prayer to herself. The old woman was afraid that with such words people might inadvertently jinx her daughter's happiness. Meanwhile, Ashley was enjoying her new role as a mom. She enjoyed fussing with her baby, singing songs, putting on her baby's cradles, feeding her baby formula from a bottle. Ashley did her best to take care of her daughter, which sometimes frustrated her mother. Mary also wanted to nurse her granddaughter, so she would occasionally say to her daughter with a sad smile, "You're like a hen. You don't let anyone near you. And I am not a stranger to the baby. I want to babysit the baby too." "Oh, Mom, Amber is my little angel. And I'm just afraid to part with her even for 5 minutes," Ashley replied. Time passed and the girl turned 3. Mary started talking about putting Amber in kindergarten. Ashley immediately flatly refused the offer, which caused her mother's bewilderment. The old woman looked at her daughter with incomprehension and said that the child needed to start contact with her peers. Ashley, hearing her mother's words, replied that she would go with her daughter to the playground where the kids were walking. Mary did not insist any further, realizing that Ashley would not be persuaded. After that conversation, a couple months flew by. Ashley walked with Amber in the public garden. The woman watched her daughter digging in the sand with her peers. Suddenly, Amber grabbed a child's shovel and knocked the girl on the head with it. The little girl cried and ran to her mother. Ashley felt bad about her daughter's behavior and approached Amber to reprimand her. Frowning her eyebrows, the mother said, "Girls." Ashley was outraged at her daughter Amber's behavior in the sandbox. She took the trowel from her and gave it to another girl, apologizing. Ashley then said the walk was over, which displeased Amber. At home, Ashley told her husband Ben what had happened. Mary, Ashley's mother, upon hearing the story, stated, "This is still the flowers. The berries will come later." What you don't realize, Ashley, is that your daughter lives a reclusive life and thinks everything should be done just for her. You lack discipline, and as a mother, you're indulging your child in everything. Can't you see that the girl is turning into a little selfish girl? What are you talking about, Mom? Amber is a wonderful girl. You're just looking for faults in her that aren't really there, Ashley replied. Mary turned reproachfully to her son-in-law, Ben. Why don't you say something? Amber is your daughter, too. Don't you notice anything strange about her behavior? Ben grumbled and hurried away so as not to continue the conversation. In the evening, Ashley put her daughter to bed and then joined her husband in the bedroom. Maybe Mom is right about Amber growing up selfish. After all, sometimes she doesn't ask, she demands to buy this or that toy, she said thoughtfully. I don't know what to answer. Maybe our daughter needs a little brother or sister, Ben suggested. Well, let's do that now, he said with a smile as he hugged his wife. Honey, I'm serious. Maybe we really should listen to Mom and put Amber in daycare, Ashley replied. You know, I agree with that. Mary is retiring soon. Her allowance will be small. Our family budget is going to become quite paltry, and we need to repair the roof, its finances. If you get a job, we'll have extra income, Ben reasoned. A couple weeks later, Amber was enrolled in kindergarten, and Ashley went straight to work. At first, Amber was cranky and refused to go to daycare, complaining about her stomach or her leg. Lily believed it at first, but then realized that her daughter was being sly to avoid going to daycare. Ashley had a hard time convincing Amber to attend. When Amber stopped being cranky, other problems began. Caregivers complained about her behavior, saying she was acting arrogant and hurting other children. Ashley gave her daughter educational talks, but the complaints continued. Once again, when Ashley came to pick up Amber, the kindergarten teacher said Amber is an insufferable child. She doesn't get enough belt training. What did you say? With a belt? Are you out of your mind? You have a teacher's education. Ashley was outraged. How can you even mention the belt? I'm doing preventive counseling with my daughter at home. But you, too, should be helping me so that the girl adapts to her peers. Talk to the child and tell her that what she's doing is wrong. And if you and I do not find a common language, then I will have to appeal to your management. After this conversation between Ashley and the teacher, the complaints stopped, and after a while Amber was eager to go to kindergarten. Life slowly moved on. Ashley now dreamed of having a second child. She wanted to give her husband an heir. However, time passed, and the woman could not get pregnant. One evening, Ashley talked to her mother and said that she dreamed of having a second child. Mary sighed sadly after her daughter's words and sadly said, I'll let you in on a secret. Basically, Amber is your only child, and there won't be any others. Why is that? It's because we're on our third generation of having only one child, and it's necessarily a girl. That was my grandmother's, then my mom's, and then mine. I wanted to have at least 3 too, but God gave me only you. It's an ancient prejudice. You could say it's a coincidence, though. Don't take hope away from me. I'm bound to have more. I'm sorry, daughter. I probably shouldn't have told you that. I don't want to take away your dream. I just thought you should know about it." The older woman sighed heavily and actually regretted her words. Time moved on imperceptibly, and it was about to be her 6th birthday when suddenly Mary felt sick. The woman was washing dishes in the kitchen when she felt a severe headache. The pensioner, writhing from the spasm, hurried to the kitchen cabinet, which stored medicines. However, the woman did not have time to get a pill, as she lost consciousness. Mary Ashley discovered Mary when she returned from daycare with her daughter. The woman, seeing her mother lying on the floor, cried out desperately and rushed to her mom. Amber, hearing her mom scream, cried frightened. Meanwhile, Ashley tried to bring the pensioner to her senses, but she was unsuccessful, and then she called an ambulance. Soon Mary was hospitalized. Ashley waited for the hospital with visits. She wanted to know what was wrong with her mother. When the woman went to the doctor once again, the doctor quietly said the cancer is brain cancer. "I can't say anything else, as I am not a specialist in this case. I have other specifics. You need to get to a specialized clinic as soon as possible." "How so?" whispered the woman, who couldn't believe what the medical professional had just told her. That same evening, Ashley told her spouse about everything. The couple began to consider where they could find a decent amount of money to travel to the regional city. Ben suggested taking out a loan, but his wife didn't refuse. Soon Mary was taken to the regional city by her daughter. The elderly woman lay for a while in the hospital, and then Ashley came for her, who hoped that everything was not so terrible. However, the doctor's words shocked her. Stage 4. So what's wrong with that? It's not like it's a verdict. People live at this stage. You told me you're a medical professional. It's not for me to tell you what stage 4 is. Yes, people live at that stage, but the only question is how long they live. There's one thing I don't understand about your situation. How could you, a medical professional, allow your mother to have such a neglected disease? Mom rarely complained of headaches, and if she did say she had a headache, she added that it was the magnetic storms. They affect her that way, Ashley replied, hiding her face in her palms and crying desperately. The doctor put his arm around the visitor and said, "I understand your condition, but you should pull yourself together now, as you need to go to your mom. And I don't think Mary will be happy when she sees her daughter crying. Wait, shouldn't we go to the Capitol?" The man in the white coat looked sadly at the lady, then shrugged his shoulders. And then the doctor went to the table, where there was a decanter, and poured water into a glass. And only after a few moments the visitor uttered, "Hope dies last." It's a folk saying. If it makes you feel better, go to Washington. They have better equipment there. But I'm not sure they'll give you a cure that'll get your mom back on her feet in no time. If I were you, personally, I would spend the money not to buy expensive drugs that won't help, but to make my mom's last days happy. Knew what she wanted and would fight to fulfill mom's dream. And if mom asks to prolong her life, then how would you fulfill your mom's wish? Ashley asked in a low voice and looked at the doctor point blank. The man hummed uncertainly, and after a few seconds he said, "I'd buy regular vitamins at the drugstore and give them to my mom. But at the same time I would tell her that these vitamins prolong life." "But you would not fulfill your mother's wishes, but only make an appearance." "Sometimes the appearance is life-extending." Soon the lady picked up her mother from the hospital and came home with her. The woman told her husband about the conversation with the doctor, as well as the desire to go to Washington, to which the spouse replied, "Don't you think the doctor was right when he said that the Capitol is unlikely to help anymore? You watch TV and see when celebrities are diagnosed with cancer, and public people spend fabulous money. And what's the result? Are you saying we should just give up and watch mom go quietly to the grave?" "I'm not saying that. Don't twist my words. I'm just trying to make the point that Mary should be at home, not in a hospital room. I don't know how much longer my mother-in-law has left to live, but I'd like her to feel peaceful and uncomfortable. All right, so be it. Mary lived only 2 months after her hospitalization. It happened early one morning when the sun was just coming out. The daughter, who had been sleeping with her mother lately, found out that the person she loved was no longer in the world. At first, Ashley felt guilty for not realizing in time when her mother complained of headaches. Ben tried to reason with his wife to stop tormenting herself. However, after such support, the woman went into a screaming fit. And when once again Ashley blamed herself for not looking after her mother, the head of the family said, "You're getting paranoid. Stop being hysterical and let it go. Don't you realize you're becoming toxic? It's all because of your speculation. You're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting me and my daughter. You don't understand anything. I'm a medical professional, and I should have responded to Mom's complaints. And I didn't. And as a result, Mom is no longer alive. It's my fault she passed away so early. Oh, honey, you're really getting on my nerves. Why don't you stop beating yourself up? I think you should take a vacation with your daughter right before Amber starts first grade. Get some rest and relaxation. I'd go with you, but I don't have vacation until October. What do you think of my offer?" asked the husband and hugged his wife, who was still sobbing. The woman only nodded in response. She no longer had the strength to argue with her husband. Soon Ashley and her daughter left on a trip to the Gulf Coast. The woman was glad that Ben had insisted on the trip. Ashley spent a week at the sea with her daughter, and now it was the last day. Before leaving, Amber asked her mom to go to the beach one last time to admire the sea. Ashley did not refuse the child, and soon mother and daughter were already walking barefoot on the soft golden sand. Every now and then the girl ran to the water to touch the water with her toe. Ashley was watching her daughter when someone called her name. The woman looked back in bewilderment and saw her ex-husband Jason walking toward her. Ashley stared at him in amazement. Jason approached the woman and said hello in a friendly manner before mouthing, "Taking a vacation. I heard from my sister that you have a daughter. Congratulations, you've been dreaming of having kids." "Thank you. So many years have not seen each other, although we live in the same city. But we met at the sea. Listen, let's go sit in a cafe and talk. You and I have a lot to remember. You haven't changed a bit since the baby was born. You're just as petite as before. I'd love to reminisce with you about our pranks in bed. Thank you for the invitation, but I must refuse you. My daughter and I are leaving today, and you'd be better off with your wife, because I have a man I love, and I'm not attracted to the side, unlike you," Ashley replied softly, disgusted by her ex-husband's tone about intimacy. Meanwhile, Jason frowned and said wistfully, "We're not making love to my wife right now. She's 2 months away from giving birth, and she's blown to smithereens. I told my husband to terminate the pregnancy. After all, there are already 2 children, and she said that she will give birth to a third. So it's wonderful that you have so many children. Children are happiness. But I just don't understand why you walk on the beach without your soulmate and children. My wife's at home, and I'm here on business, like on a business trip. My father-in-law's a businessman, so he sent me down here for a couple days. Well, good luck with your business. We should get going with our daughter," Ashley said quietly and beckoned her daughter over to her. The woman took the girl's hand and they headed towards the exit of the beach. Ashley walked at that moment and thought how lucky Jason's wife was to already have 2 children and to be carrying a baby under her heart at this time. Soon Ashley and her daughter arrived home. They were gushing over Ben about what a wonderful time they had. Amber took a handful of sand out of her backpack to make her daddy happy. Ashley laughed when she saw it. Her husband looked at his wife in bewilderment, but she was even more amused when she saw Ben's amazed face. When the first emotions from the sand had passed, Ashley explained the reason for her laughter. She told her husband that she had hidden something in her backpack the night before she left. Ashley hadn't thought much of it at the time, but as she put her daughter's backpack on her shoulders, she wondered why it was so heavy. Ben, still not realizing anything, looked into his daughter's backpack and immediately chuckled, and through a fit of laughter turned to his daughter. "You wanted so much to please Daddy that you stuffed the whole backpack with sand. That's a good girl to please your father. So you were sunbathing in the sun like me and Mom. And now you can fill a trough with water, pour sand on the ground next to it. And it's like you're having a vacation at the sea. It's great, isn't it? You're so good at it." "That's a wonderful idea. And Jackson Sunshine, Daddy will give you a kiss for being clever." Life moved on, and soon it was time to go to first grade. On the eve of that event, Ashley put her daughter to bed and headed into the hall to iron her white apron. She spread the bedspread on the board, and then laid the apron down thoughtfully and spoke softly. "How quickly time runs. You too. Our daughter is going to first grade tomorrow. As my mother used to tell me, it's worth it for a child to go to school, then time will fly by after that imperceptibly." "Is that you talking to yourself?" pronounced Ben, who had just entered the room and heard his spouse's phrase. "I'm saying that you and I are getting a little old now. And you know, my mom was right when she said that all women in our line give birth to only one child. And it's always a girl. Oh, that's so lucky. You and me were in the prime of our lives. And as for the one-child thing, that's just prejudice. That's what I told my mother. But you see, I can't get pregnant again." "That's all right. We still have a whole cartload of time. Drop what you're doing and let's go into the bedroom to make a baby," Ben said, and winked excitedly at his spouse. Ashley smiled and said, "I was having a serious conversation with you." "And you're at it again?" "I'm being quite serious, too. And about the kids, I can only say this: we have a daughter. And we should be happy about it. We need to get Amber on her feet so she can go to school and get a good life in the future." And so Amber has already started first grade. Her mother and father alternately took her daughter to and picked her up from school. The girl studied willingly, and soon parents often heard praise from the class teacher. Ashley and her husband were only happy. The first half of the year flew by. Amber became friends with a classmate. The girl's name was Christina. Friends spent a lot of time together. The parents of the girls were only happy about this friendship, which did not affect the performance at school. And now it was spring. The time of summer vacation was approaching. Amber came home alone. She had already been released to school alone after the winter. The girl came home and went to her room without greeting her mother, who was busy in the kitchen. Ashley was curious as to why her daughter had done that. The woman wiped her hands on a towel and proceeded to the nursery, where she saw her upset daughter. The homeowner approached the girl and asked what had happened. Amber glanced glumly at her mom and immediately, almost tearfully, said, "Christina, her parents bought her rollerblades, as well as a helmet, elbow pads, and knee pads. I want to go rollerblading in the summer too." "And what are you getting upset about? Daddy will come over and talk to him about it." "It's all words. Dad already promised me a bicycle." "And what? He bought a jump bike. It's a shame to even ride it in the yard. Dad bought me the bike I pointed out in the store, and then suddenly I needed another one. He said, ride this one first, and then you can get another bike. I don't need a bike now. I want rollerblades." In the evening, Ben came home from work, as his daughter immediately ran up to him and asked him to buy rollers. The head of the family, after a little thought, promised his daughter to make the purchase. Ashley heard the answer. The spouse did not interfere in the conversation between father and daughter. However, when Amber went to bed, Ashley emphatically stated that she was against the purchase. Ben looked at his wife in amazement and asked, "Why do you disapprove of rollerblading?" "She's too young for the sport. Amber is a girl, not a boy. It's more appropriate for her to play with her dolls, not run around on those rollerblades like tomboys everywhere." Wait, honey, you know what kids are like these days. Girls only play dolls in kindergarten, and once they go to school, their priorities change. And anyway, how can you imagine our daughter's friend rollerblading and Amber looking at her with envy? It's a very interesting picture. And if Christina bought a live tiger tomorrow, would you run out and buy that animal for your daughter too? Why make it so complicated? Okay, if you promised your daughter, then buy the rollers. But I warn you right away that you will walk with Zlata when she starts to learn to ride them. Whatever you say, my queen. Ashley ah-head when she heard the sum. However, the woman glanced at her daughter, who was looking at the roller skates with wild delight. Afterward, Ashley smiled at her spouse and said, "Look at how happy our daughter is about these rollerblades. As they say, what's a little something for a child to be happy about? Okay, go outside and try out the accessories and then tell us about the progress." Time went on its own. At first, Ben accompanied his daughter and her friend on outings after work. And then, when Amber became more confident on rollers, the family decided that the girl would ride only in the park and never on the roadway. Amber happily agreed to this proposal, as she was already tired of her dad accompanying her. And Christina's father does not do it. June and then July flew by. Ashley was coming home from her shift. She rode on the shuttle bus and smiled as she recalled her day at work. Soon the driver announced a stop. The woman got out of the vehicle and headed to the nearest store to buy milk and eggs. Ashley was going to make an omelet for dinner. The woman had already approached the store when she heard her spouse calling her. Ashley turned around and asked what he was doing here. Ben smiled and pronounced, "I wanted to meet you from work, but I guess I didn't time it right." "There's something you're not telling me, honey. Spill what happened," the woman mumbled worriedly. Ben, seeing his wife's reaction, laughed and immediately said, "It's actually our boss's anniversary. He let everyone go home early, but I wasted my time and cooked dinner at home myself. And then I saw that there was no bread at home and hurried to the store, where I saw you. And I thought something had happened to my daughter," Ashley said, relieved. Then she smiled and said, "Let your boss have a holiday every day then. I'll be spared the cooking then." Imagine how happy that would be for a woman. By the way, I forgot to ask, what did you cook? Flotsam pasta is my specialty. You know very well that cooking is not my business. That's what I have you for. Now you tell me how your day at work went." Ashley looked lovingly at her husband. Then she told him that she'd had a hard day at work. He asked why it had been tiring at work. Ashley smiled and said, "Although it's a hard day, it's a joyful one. A woman gave birth to triplets today. Imagine. She's 38 years old and this is her first labor. You should have seen this woman in labor when she was given her first baby in her arms. That woman's eyes were full of happiness. That's the first time I've seen eyes like that in so many years. And the funniest thing is that when she was transferred from the labor room to the ward, she began to wonder how she would feed 3 babies because she had only 2 breasts. Our medical staff, everyone who was in the ward, just fell down laughing. They found something to laugh about. If I were a woman, I might be interested in that question too. Although, I admire our woman in labor because she gave birth at 38. And you've given up on the whole thing. We should do the same thing tonight, as soon as we put our daughter to bed. And maybe don't even hint to me that you had a hard day's work or a headache. You won't get away from me today," he said with a smile. "Let's go home then. Can't wait to taste your specialty," said the wife with a laugh and took her husband under her elbow. And so it was already the end of August. School was a few days away. Amber walked up to her mom and asked to go for a walk. Ashley had the day off today. She glanced out the window and then turned to her daughter. "It's okay to walk, but just no rollerblades." Amber frowned and immediately inquired, "Why no rollerblades?" "The weather's turning bad. It's supposed to rain. Maybe you and Christina can sit with us today and play on the laptop," Mom replied. So much for Mom's idea. There were only a few days left until school started, and then there would definitely be no time to go for a ride. "Mom, let me go. Christina and I will skate carefully, as always." "Mom, you're the best in the world. My favorite. You know I can't refuse you when you ask me to. Go on, take a walk," said the woman and kissed her daughter on the top of her head. As soon as the girl jumped out of the door, the woman felt a vague uneasiness in her soul. Ashley was about to run out after her daughter and call her home when her cell phone rang. The woman was distracted by the phone call and then went out into the yard. But her daughter was not there, of course. It had been about 2 hours since Amber had gone for a walk. Ashley still felt a heaviness in her soul. The woman dialed her daughter and asked how they were doing. Amber cheerfully replied that everything was fine and immediately disconnected the connection. Hearing her daughter's voice made Ashley feel a little calmer. Another hour passed before Amber left for her walk. Ashley started the laundry. She pulled out her daughter's terrycloth robe as there was a loud knock on the door. At the same time, the woman heard Christina crying. Ashley hurried to the door, and as soon as she opened it, she saw Christina's crying face. The landlady asked anxiously, "What happened?" "Amber was hit by a car," she said through her sobs. "I came straight to you." "What do you mean, hit by a car? What are you talking about? Where's Amber?" "They took her away in an ambulance," Christina said through sobs. Ashley sucked in air with her mouth and then asked the girl where it had happened. When she found out where the hit and run had happened, the woman rushed to the scene of the tragedy without changing her slippers. When she got there, she saw a small crowd of gawkers, as well as a cordon of the place on the stretch of road. The woman, pushing people, rushed to the place. As soon as she got there, she saw the chalked silhouette of a child on the pavement, as well as brown bloodstains. Not far away, Ashley spotted a helmet. The helmet belonged to her daughter, and at the same moment the woman lost consciousness. Ashley woke up in the hospital. Sitting next to her was her husband Ben, who was holding her hand. As soon as Ben saw that his wife came to her senses, he immediately jumped up and ran out into the hallway, where he loudly called a nurse. A girl in a white coat hurried into the room. She approached Ashley and asked how the woman was feeling. Ashley waved her hand and wanted to get up. Her husband wouldn't let her. Then the woman asked her spouse, "What about your daughter?" "She's alive. Amber's in the ICU. The doctors are fighting for her life. Help me up. I need to be near my daughter. My presence will help her." "You just had a heart attack, and you can't get up," Ben said quietly but firmly. He wanted to add something else, but at that moment the doctor entered the room and came up to Ashley and said, "Are you awake? That's great. You're going to be given an injection, and then try to sleep. I'm not going to be here. Let's get you the papers you need to sign to refuse hospitalization." "Ashley, do I really need to tell you as a medical professional what the consequences of refusing medical care are?" The man in the white coat said sternly. "That's exactly what I know. That is why you should not waste your precious time now and explain to me the plain truths which I already know without you." The doctor looked at Ben after the woman's words, but he only waved his hands, thus making it clear that he could not influence his spouse in this situation. And after a while, Ashley was near the entrance to the intensive care unit. She prayed to God that her daughter would survive. Ben at this time stood near the window and looked at the sill with a hateful look. Some time passed. Ashley walked over to her husband and quietly touched his elbow. The husband immediately flinched at the touch and turned to his wife. He put his arm around Ashley and then pressed the woman's head against his chest and immediately felt her crying. Ben asked her to calm down, but the woman didn't respond to her husband's words. Ben became nervous. He was worried that his wife might have a second stroke. The man wanted to run after the nurse as he was stopped by his spouse, who faintly said, "Tell me what happened." "I can't tell you much." Anyway, the girls were already rollerblading home. They needed to pass the zebra. As here Christina had a slip on her lap, she bent down to correct it, and her daughter at the same time moved across the road, and then a foreign car flew out. Amber didn't have time to react and a hit and run occurred. Christina was saved from the collision by her knee pads. Witnesses called an ambulance and police officers. The investigator told me the driver fled the scene. But he's already been arrested. He was under the influence of alcohol when he hit our daughter. Ben was silent, looked at his wife, who only clenched her hands in a fist. The woman's face had gone pale. Ashley didn't say anything. She just stood there staring at one point. The man did not know how to behave in this situation, so once again pressed his wife to him and gently said, "Everything will work out, and our daughter will still recover." "I want that bastard to get the maximum punishment," Ashley told him. "That criminal will get what he deserves. Right now, I think you should go home so you can recover." "No home, our little girl needs us here." "Okay, sweetheart." It was another couple hours before 2 doctors came out of the ICU. Ashley rushed over to them and grabbed one doctor by the chest. The man in the white coat tried to pull his hands off the woman, but he was unsuccessful. And then the second doctor turned to the lady's husband. "We did everything we could here, but the girl suffered many injuries. We couldn't save her." Ashley, as soon as she heard this, pushed the doctor away, then sobbed loudly. She then turned to her husband and started beating her fists on his chest, shouting, "It's your fault. It's your fault. I was against these videos. How am I supposed to live without my little girl?" One of the doctors quickly realized that the woman was hysterical. The man in the white coat shouted something to the nurse, who came out to the noise. The lady was given an injection and soon she fell asleep. Ben was next to his wife the whole time. And as soon as the spouse woke up, she asked to take her home. The man complied with the request without any objection. Amber's funeral soon followed. All this time Ashley was in prostration. She did not understand why so many people had come to the cemetery, and also did not realize why those present were expressing their condolences to her. It wasn't until the coffin was being lowered into the hole that Ashley realized it was her baby girl being buried. The woman shrieked, ran to the coffin, wrapped both arms around it, and screamed, "Don't. I can't let my daughter go to her final resting place alone. I want to lie next to her." From the coffin, Ashley was able to tear Ben together with her father, who came to the funeral of his granddaughter. The woman was then picked up by neighbors and hurriedly taken away from the cemetery. At home, Ashley could not sit down at the table to memorialize her daughter as she became ill with heart trouble. Her spouse called an ambulance and the woman was hospitalized. Several days passed after the funeral. Ben visited his spouse daily, although it was a long drive. "We still don't know when the trial will be. Be patient, my dear. Let's get better at my place," he told her. "Why should I get better if our daughter is no longer in this world?" Ashley replied, "I realize that we lost our only child, but don't forget that I need you, that I love you, and I can't lose you. And Amber wouldn't want that either." Some time passed. Ashley was released from the hospital and went to work. The days seemed like torture for the woman. Ashley hated the nights most of all, as sleep was non-existent. She had fleeting visions of her daughter coming to her and asking her to punish the man who hit her. Ben saw that his wife could not find peace until she knew what punishment the driver would receive, and soon the trial took place. As it turned out, that driver was some local oligarch. The defendant got off with a fine. It was twisted to mean that Amber was crossing the road in the wrong place. Amber's testimony disappeared from the case, and a whole new set of witnesses came forward. When Ashley found out about it, She went door to door with the D.A.'s office, the police, the DMV. But everywhere she was pointed at the door. The woman was desperate, and after another visit to the investigator, she came home and drank a few shots of whitewater. Ashley literally immediately became tipsy, as strong drinks were not spoiled. When her husband came home from work, her wife said to him in an inebriated voice, "How can you live peacefully in this world when our daughter is gone because of your fault? First of all, you, my dove, are drunk. Let's talk about it tomorrow when you're sober. I want to tell you everything now. You're not really a man. The man who ruined my daughter is out there, and you didn't even lift a finger to avenge him. What can I do when money rules the world now? Don't you understand that? What do you think I should do? Go to that oligarch and throw him from the 5th floor. Would that make you feel better? Only I'd have to go to jail for it, because I don't have the money to pay him off. I'd go and throw him from the 5th floor. Maybe then my daughter would stop coming to me at night." Ben did not say anything to his wife, only took the bottle of hot drink from her hands. And afterward, the man retired to the nursery to ponder how to help his wife overcome the loss of her only daughter. Sasha did not sleep all night, and the only thing that came to his mind was to take his wife to the bishop in the church, which he soon did. After the church visit, the lady was now less often visited by her daughter in dreams. Time moved on imperceptibly, and now a year has passed since Amber was buried. During this time, the lady had hardened a bit. Whereas she used to come to work in high spirits, now she disliked women in labor. The woman did not tell anyone about it. But the team has already noticed that Ashley often rudely treats future moms. The chief, Dr. Jackson Michael, repeatedly made his subordinate remarks on this matter. The woman promised to correct herself, but everything was repeated again. And once Ashley, together with the doctor, delivered a woman in labor. The young woman was in labor for the first time. And when the contractions began, she screamed that she was in pain. Ashley considered the future mommy hysterical, and the words of the doctor made remarks to her, and after the birth wrote a report to the chief doctor. Jackson Michael familiarized himself with the document and called Ashley to his office. As soon as the woman entered, the master of the office seriously said, "This can't go on any longer. If before, everyone wanted you to assist in childbirth, but now women in labor, just hearing your name, frightened. Maybe you should go to the sea with your husband, get away for a while. I understand your grief that you lost a child, but our patients are not to blame. Let's find some common ground, otherwise we'll go our separate ways, even though you're an excellent midwife. Now, I want an answer from you. I'm going to reconsider how I treat my patients. I'm sorry, it won't happen again." I've heard that before. Ashley, why don't you give me one last chance? Okay? You might want to think about taking a vacation. A change of scenery for a while is good for a person, especially in your situation. Ashley came home in a gloomy mood. She went into the kitchen to make dinner, but immediately changed her mind and went into the living room, where she turned on the TV. The woman didn't watch the program at all. She was thinking about how to continue going to work. Ashley was distracted from her thoughts by her husband, who sat down next to her and said affectionately, "How was your work day? A lot of women gave birth today. Why are you interested? Honey, what's the matter with you? Actually, I've always been interested in that. Then from now on, stop doing it. How I'm sick of everything. How I'm sick of everything," said the wife nervously. Ben frowned after his wife's words and then said firmly, "Tell me what happened at work." Ashley didn't talk herself into it twice, but honestly recounted the conversation with the head doctor. Ben was silent for a long time after his wife's narration, and then asked why she had developed a dislike for laboring women. Ashley thought for a moment, and then, looking her husband in the eye, confessed, "You know, I look at their happy faces when they're presented with a baby, and it's like I get an electric shock inside. And it's because they're moms. and I'm never going to get to experience that. It's moments like that when it's like I'm possessed. I can't help it. In that case, should you quit this job? You can't force yourself to do something you don't want to do. I get the impression that you've grown to hate being a midwife and find no outlet in this job. What do you mean quit? Do you want me to sit in four walls and slowly go insane? I'm not suggesting you sit at home. You could get a job as a clerk in a small store. I think you'll be able to balance your debit and credit. Or maybe we should really go on vacation somewhere in the country, take a tent, fishing rods, and spend a week in solitude. And then think about changing jobs. Okay, let's do that, honey. Soon the couple went on vacation to Ben's father's house in the country. The couple had a great time. They often went to nature, where they fished in the lake, and then together they picked berries. Ashley then confessed to her husband that it was a pity that they did not go on vacation when Amber was alive. The husband did not answer anything to his wife, as he realized that if he said a word, his wife would start crying. A week later, the couple went back. Ben, upon arrival, asked his wife if she could go out to work in the maternity ward. Ashley replied in agreement. The woman actually believed the trip had changed her internally, and soon Ashley was on shift. The first day was fine, but after a week the same feeling of resentment returned to her. Ashley tried to fight her envy. She even pinched her arm to keep from being rude. It had been about a month since the vacation. Ashley arrived at work and mentally wished to herself that there were as few women as possible wanting to be moms today. Ashley had no idea what a difficult shift she was about to have. And it had all started when Taylor Grievna, the doctor on duty, had her daughter's fever. The young woman asked, "Check to see if you can handle it on your own today, especially with 4 hours left in the shift. Just understand I am divorced from my husband, and there is no one to look after my daughter, and I'm worried about her. She's got a fever of 38.8. She called me the other day." Taylor Grievna, go with peace of mind. I've never delivered a baby on my own, have I? And there's someone to help you if you need it. The head doctor's on call today. By the way, did you ask him to leave? Otherwise he'll ask me and I won't answer, and I'll get in trouble. Yeah, I talked to him. He's a man of the world and he recognized my situation right away. He also said that if Ashley was working, there was nothing to worry about. That head doctor of ours is flattering me. All right, go ahead, Taylor Grievna. You'll be running an even higher fever by the time you get home to your daughter. Just as Ashley escorted the woman out, a nurse announced that there were 2 women in labor. Ashley sighed to herself and hurried into the exam room. There was one middle-aged woman in there who had been brought in by ambulance. Ashley began to ask the patient questions in a businesslike manner. Just then, the head doctor entered the room and addressed the midwife. "This is going to be fun today. You're taking care of this woman, and I'm about to have a difficult labor." Ashley sighed sorrowfully and hurried to examine the woman. As soon as she saw the patient's chart, she immediately shuddered in displeasure. The woman in labor, Rachel Lionel, was 58 years old. After all the necessary procedures, the woman in labor was taken to the labor room. Ashley was clearly giving commands as to how the patient should proceed. Rachel Lionel responded by moaning and begging for the baby to be saved. Ashley was angry with the woman, unable to suppress her anger. And when the woman in labor moaned again, the midwife said angrily, "You're crazy. How could you think of giving birth at the age of 58? Now keep quiet and do as you're told." The labor was difficult. Ashley was completely exhausted. She would have been happy to have the help of the chief of medicine. But Jackson Michael was delivering triplets, and he was having a hard time with it too. And when the workday was over, Ashley breathed a sigh of relief. Now the only thing she wanted to do was come home, take a bath, and go to bed. This day she even changed her principles. She called a cab to get to her place of residence. Previously, she had not allowed herself such expenses. Soon the woman was already at home, where she was met by her husband Ben. He offered his wife to eat, but she waved away and said that she did not want anything, as the day was stressful. Afterward, Ashley said she delivered a baby for an elderly woman. Her husband whistled in surprise and said in amazement, "I can't believe what kind of women we have here." The next day at lunchtime, Ashley received a call from the chief physician, who ordered her to report to work. The woman was often called by her superiors, so she involuntarily had a thought, and whether this call is not connected with yesterday's elderly woman in labor. There was no time to ponder, however, and Ashley drove to the hospital. As soon as she got to the second floor, where the chief physician's office was, a nurse ran up to her and whispered, "Ours is out of control, vomiting and swearing." "What's the reason?" "You know, he said something about the woman in labor yesterday." The girl in the white coat wanted to add something, but then the door opened and the head doctor appeared and said, "I was just waiting for you, Ashley. Come on, let's go have a talk." The first to enter the office was the chief physician, who stood by the desk, tapping his fingers nervously on it. Ashley came in after the man, and she knew from the doctor's demeanor that he was going to get a scolding, since he was rarely this angry. As the woman closed the door, Jackson Michael came right up to her and said sternly, "What are you doing? I am well aware that today both you and I have a day off after yesterday's duty. But I get a call from a doctor saying that a woman in labor wants to get to know me. I wouldn't have responded to this request if I hadn't been told who this woman was. Do you happen to have any idea who this woman might be?" "I do," Ashley replied. "Rachel Lionel Kopylova gave birth to a baby girl." "That's right. When I went to see her, she was curious about the midwife who delivered her baby. Naturally, I asked what was wrong. Rachel wouldn't tell me what the situation was, but it was clear she wasn't happy about what you'd done. And now I'll tell you for your understanding that this woman in labor is the wife of a very famous man in the regional city. And if now we are tortured with checks, the stumbling block will be you, because your tongue says nasty things. I'd like to add that if I fire you, your husband will get it too, and so will I for that matter." "Wait a minute," Ashley said. "If this lady is the wife of a respectable man, why did she come here to give birth? Why didn't she give birth in her own town?" "You're asking me these questions?" The head doctor was indignant. "You don't understand the seriousness of the situation. I'm not interested in why Rachel ended up in our hospital." Ashley was more concerned with the aftermath of her shift. She wasn't going to rant about it. You go on your knees and beg for forgiveness, birthing girl. Basically do whatever it takes to earn her favor. The doctor gestured toward the door, letting her know that the conversation was over. Ashley walked out of the office. Her face was burning. The woman didn't know how to start a conversation with the woman in labor, whom she had insulted. Nevertheless, Ashley pulled herself together and headed toward the room. She knocked on the door and then entered. Immediately, her attention was caught by the way Rachel Lionel was admiring her newborn daughter. Ashley hesitated, letting her know she was in the room. She turned at the sound and looked at the midwife intently. "I want to apologize to you," Ashley spoke first. "I behaved inappropriately with you yesterday. I'll get down on my knees if you want me to. But please forgive me. I didn't know whose wife you were." "Don't clean it. Are you saying that if I were the wife of a locksmith or a janitor, you wouldn't feel guilty about talking to a woman in labor like that?" Rachel Lionel said sternly and looked reproachfully at the midwife. Ashley at that moment was ready to fall to the ground in shame, because she realized that she had said something stupid. But she answered nonetheless. "I wouldn't feel guilty." "Well, thank you for your honest answer. If you lied now, I'd lose the last shred of respect for you. Now tell me, why are you so rude to women in labor? Don't deny it, since I've been doing a little checking up on you around here." Ashley looked at Rachel with a sad look, and then tears ran down her cheeks. The midwife, without knowing why, told this woman how she had lost her baby, that the perpetrator had gotten off scot-free after the hit and run, and told her that she dreamed of becoming a mom, but it wasn't happening. Therefore, when women of advanced age give birth, she is filled with anger and envy. Rachel listened attentively to the interlocutor. Then she smiled sadly. She invited the midwife to sit down next to her, then took her hand and asked her to stop crying. Ashley wiped her tears away with the palm of her hand. While smearing mascara on her face, Rachel immediately held out a damp washcloth with the words, "Are you now, like a lost sheep, aware of our fate? Related. At one time, I couldn't get pregnant for a long time either. And when it did happen, it was a miracle for me and my husband. My husband at that time was still a small official in the administration. And then my son grew up and against parental will, after serving in the army, went to the hot spot. My husband and I hoped that the trouble would pass us by. However, the miracle did not happen. Our boy died. We could not recover from this tragedy for a long time. But as they say, time heals. My husband moved up the career ladder, and that's when I had the idea that I could still have a child. I was examined in many clinics, but the doctors were throwing up their hands. And then came the decision to do IVF. My husband and I consulted. He is 7 years younger than me, and we came to a mutual agreement that we could take a risk. And the risk justified our expectations. We have a daughter. The main thing is that our health should be good." Ashley sat in silence after Rachel's story. The woman's story had touched something in her soul. Meanwhile, Jackson Michael paced nervously around the office, wondering if Ashley had made amends, and unable to bear it, the man strode into the room, where he saw a peaceful conversation between the women, who smiled at each other. The chief physician came out in bewilderment. The only thing he realized was that the conflict was over. Meanwhile, Ashley smiled embarrassedly and asked the question she had been wondering about the late pregnancy. "It's understandable. I'm happy for you, but I just don't understand why you came to give birth in a provincial town." "I didn't really want to come here," Rachel answered Lionel. But immediately, becoming serious, she continued. "My husband went on a business trip to New York. I was against this trip, but my husband is still an enthusiast, likes to be in the know. My spouse was away for 2 days and should have been back by now. Then I got the call that he had a heart attack. I could not stay at home and drove myself by car to that city. However, the nervousness had taken its toll. I felt the baby wanted to be born, so your town came up. And in the morning, my husband called and said that he is doing well and he will be here soon. I had to scold him and scare him that if he leaves the hospital without permission, our daughter will be taken away from the hospital. My blackmail succeeded. What a brave woman you are," Ashley said with admiration. "I'm not brave. I just love my husband as much as he loves me. And yet I envy you, but with white envy. I mean, you realized your dream and became a mom. Can you do it too? You're a midwife and you know what IVF is." "I do, but I'm afraid my husband wouldn't like it," Ashley said quietly. "And that's where you're wrong. From your story, your husband loves you and would do anything to make you happy. My advice is to go for it. Just don't hurt any more women in labor. I give you my word it won't happen again. Meeting you and your story changed something in my soul, and you know I'm very happy about it.